Chapter 2176. Radiant Godking Jianchun, don't go out. It's safer in here. Once you go out, you won't even be able to escape with your current strength. Kaya grabbed Jianchun's arm on the first floor of the Anata Tower as she said in worry. Jianchun looked at Kaya in surprise. You can hear the voice outside? Although the interior and exterior were only separated by a wall, they were two different spaces in reality. He could hear the voice outside and sense the activity there because he had refined a portion of the Anata Tower. But how did Kaya know what was happening outside? Jianchun found this extremely to be bewildering. Yeah. As my strength increased, I started to be able to vaguely sense what's going on outside, said Kaya. In reality, she too was extremely bewildered because she discovered that as her strength rapidly progressed, not only could she sense what was going on outside the tower, but she also found the tower to be more and more familiar. As a matter of fact, she even felt like she had fused with the space in the tower from time to time. Jianchun found what Kaya said to be strange. If it were a saint artifact of quite a low quality, it would indeed be very difficult for it to block off Kaya's senses as a god king. However, the Anata Tower was not a saint artifact of quite a low quality. It was a god artifact of the highest quality. Even if it was very damaged, it was impossible for Kaya to be able to sense the outside without refining the Anata Tower with her current level of cultivation. Jianchun could not understand this no matter how he thought. However, it clearly was not the time for him to ponder on this. He said, Kaya, don't worry. Nothing will happen to me. If I really do encounter danger, I'll escape with this cosmic movement talisman. Jianchun took out the final cosmic movement talisman from his space ring with that. He clenched it in his hand tightly and left the Anata Tower. As soon as he left the Anata Tower, Jianchun saw an old woman in simple clothes and messy hair that basically covered her face. She stood nearby with her arms on her back. The old woman did not look at Jianchun. Her knowledgeable eyes were locked onto the damaged Anata Tower, as her expression became extremely mixed. Senior, it's you? Jianchun was surprised as soon as he saw the old woman. He was taken aback. He recognized the old woman who had her presence concealed with a single glance. She was the person who had traded for his damaged god artifact armor back on the spatial battleship. You're actually still alive? The old woman glanced at Jianchun indifferently. Even though they had only met once in the past, the matter with the damaged god artifact armor made her develop an extremely deep impression of Jianchun. Then the old woman looked at the Anata Tower again. But since you have this, even dying is difficult. Can you tell me where you got this from? Jianchun knew that the old woman had recognized the Anata Tower. However, he did not worry. He clenched the cosmic movement talisman tightly as his vigilance was raised to the limit. He said, I found this tower out of pure coincidence in a zone of danger from a lower world. A lower world, this tower actually ended up in a lower world. The old woman murmured as she seemed to be in a trace. She seemed rather lost. After a while of silence, she continued, Was this tower found in the same place as the god artifact armor you traded to me before? They were found in the same world but in different locations, Jianchun said. Sigh. The old woman exhaled gently when she heard that as bitterness filled her face. She said, It looks like what they said is true. And if it really was like that, then I haven't been hunted down for millions of years for nothing. It wasn't for nothing. Senior, you've been hunted down for millions of years? Jianchun asked with his tongue tied. The old woman said nothing. She only stood there silently and stared at the Anata Tower, at the powerful slashes on its surface. Her gaze was mixed. Senior. Something has happened, something bad has happened. A crack has appeared in this natural concealing formation. At this moment, a man who seemed to be in his 30s arrived before the old woman in a hurry. He glanced up constantly as his voice was filled with undisguised fear and unease. I know, the old woman said calmly. She also glanced up with gloomy eyes. If the natural concealing formation had shattered because of some other reason, then so be it, but it just so happened to shatter because of this tower. This is the will of the heavens. The will of the heavens. Even the heavens do not want me to hide here comfortably. The old woman's voice was filled with bitterness. What do I do? What do I do? I haven't condensed the soul tree yet. Without this natural concealing formation, I'll probably never be able to escape from that demon. The man was flustered and uneasy as his face was filled with undisguised fear. Suddenly, the man looked at Jianchen resentfully. He called out angrily, "It's all because of you. Why did you have to destroy this formation? Why did you have to come here? You bastard, I'll never spare you." With that, a dazzling, milky white light immediately rose up from the young man. It turned into a beam of light that shot towards Jianchen with a scorching presence. The beam of light moved extremely quickly, and it was blinding. It shot through the air like an aurora, arriving before Jianchen in a single instance. Radiant Saint Force. Jianchen's eyes suddenly narrowed as he became extremely shocked. He was a Radiant Saint Master, so he was extremely familiar with Radiant Saint Force. He could tell with a single glance that the white light had been condensed from Radiant Saint Force. However, according to his understanding, Radiant Saint Force was primarily for healing wounds. Its offensive capabilities were extremely weak, and at a similar cultivation, Radiant Saint Masters were not the opponents of cultivators. However, at this moment, the white beam of light condensed from Radiant Saint Force made Jianchen experience a great sense of danger. And this level of danger had reached the same level as Supreme God King's. Jianchen experienced a certain level of threat. Is this another way of using Radiant Saint Force? Jianchen was extremely overjoyed. He had heard from Fairy Hao Yu back in the lower world that the Radiant Saint Masters of the Saints' world were extremely powerful. It made him develop a sense of anticipation long ago that he could make some more progress as a Radiant Saint Master in the Saints' world. However, Radiant Saint Masters were far rarer in the Saints' world than Jianchen had expected, so he had not encountered a single one of them despite spending so much time in the Saints' world. Finally, he coincidentally encountered a Radiant God King here today. Jianchen's heart palpitated as he was filled with undisguisable excitement. He did not choose to avoid the Radiant God King's attack, nor did he choose to counterattack. Instead, he filled his hand with chaotic force before reaching out, using his hand to catch the streak of light that shot over. He actually wanted to use the toughness of his body to forcefully receive the strand of Radiant Saint Force that was equivalent to an attack from a Supreme God King. At that critical moment, the beam of white light struck Jianchen's hand with great force, immediately producing a heavy thud. Jianchen trembled violently as he took a step back uncontrollably. His hand had become bloodied, and intense pain descended on him. This power, so powerful. On the surface, it's another way to use Radiant Saint Force, but it's actually a power that is completely different from Radiant Saint Force. It's a different type of law. Jianchen paid no attention to his wounds. Instead, he closed his eyes and began to comprehend the power seriously. The reason why he had used his hand to receive the attack was to come into contact with the power in the most direct method possible. He wanted to try and see the power with even more clarity and understand the power's characteristics. Although Jianchen was unable to grasp this power immediately from just that, he gained an understanding towards the power, allowing him to see a path forward. But this law is rather special. It can basically be called the upgraded version of Radiant Saint Force because grasping this power requires you to be a Radiant Saint Master, thought Jianchen. Jianchen was overjoyed from this discovery. He became tempted to comprehend the law as soon as possible. This was because he had not made any progress on his Radiant Saint Force for a very long time. It remained at Class 9. On the Tianyuan continent, Class 9, Radiant Saint Masters were peak experts, but in the Saints' world, they were completely useless. Their superior healing abilities were of no use to Jianchen, who had already become a God King. This was because the power was at too low of a level. It was not that Jianchen did not want to make further progress as a Radiant Saint Master. He just did not have the following cultivation method. Afterwards, the Radiant God King immediately became dumbstruck when he saw Jianchen stop his attack with just his hand. He could not help but sigh in amazement. What a tough body. But soon afterwards he began to scowl once again. He wanted to continue attacking Jianchen, clearly showing no intentions of sparing Jianchen like this. Sigh. The old woman exhaled softly. She said, "Enough. The destruction of the formation doesn't have much to do with him. It's the will of the heavens. The heavens don't want me to be safe. Speaking of which, I've dragged you into this mess as well. If I didn't hide here, Maybe they wouldn't pass by coincidentally and destroy the natural concealing formation here. The old woman looked at the damaged Anata Tower. She did not think it was all a coincidence. Rather, she believed that it was fate. Senior, Junior does not understand. The radiant God King clearly answered to the old woman's beck and call. He immediately stopped attacking Jianchen and stared at the old woman in confusion. Jianchen also stared at the old woman doubtfully. Her gaze remained locked on the Anata Tower, and she seemed amazed. Perhaps, not only did she recognize the tower, but she even had an unknown connection with the tower as well? Senior, do you know the master of this tower? Jianchen clasped his fist and asked carefully. The old woman's expression became extremely complicated when she heard that. She sighed emotionally. Speaking of it, the master of this tower is my grandmaster. However, I've never seen this supreme grandmaster before. What? The master of this tower is Senior's grandmaster? Jianchen was taken aback as disbelief filled his face. He had never thought that the old woman was actually the grand disciple of the Anata Grand Prime. The old woman stared at Jianchen deeply. Looking at your reaction, you must know the origins of this tower already. Jianchen nodded and did not lie. Since Senior is the grand disciple of this tower's master, may I ask if Senior will be taking the tower back? Jianchen clenched the cosmic movement talisman tightly. He said that to test the old woman. He had already been mentally prepared to immediately flee with the Anata Tower once something felt off. The origins of this tower are just far too great. It's not something that other people can try to possess. Once I become interested in possessing it, I won't be able to avoid death even if I flee to the ends of the world. The old woman was depressed. She was in indescribable sorrow. In name, I'm his grand disciple, and my status should be extremely great in the saints' world. I would have infinite glory, and there would basically be no one who would want to offend me. But in reality, I've been hunted down for millions of years, and I'm still running desperately now. Do you know where the people who are hunting me down come from? The old woman asked in low spirits. When she thought about her years on the run, she was filled with indescribable bitterness. Are they from the heavenly palace of Bishing? Jianchen replied with a question. He already had a general idea of the reason now. The old woman was probably Taji's disciple. That's right. The people who have hunted me down for millions of years are the divine generals of the heavenly palace of Bishing. The reason why they're hunting me down is because my master, Taji, betrayed my grandmaster. They say that my master has been working with outsiders to cause harm to my grandmaster, so I was also drawn into this matter because of my master, becoming a target for them. Originally, I refused to believe this. I did not believe my master would betray my grandmaster either. After all, my grandmaster is a famed sovereign of the saints' world, one of the strongest people in the entire universe. Was there anyone who dared to turn against him? Only when I learnt that my master's armor ended up in the same world as Grandmaster's famed treasure was I forced to believe it, the old woman said slowly. But fortunately, the majesties of the heavenly palace of Bishing never reached the same agreement about hunting me down, or I wouldn't have survived until now. Only Jianchen could hear the old woman's words. The radiant God King beside her only saw her lips move, but he heard nothing. Clearly, because Jianchen was in possession of the Anata Tower, the old woman told him everything. In the eyes of the old woman, the radiant God King had no right to learn about this. With that, Jianchen understood that the natural concealing formation he had accidentally barged into was probably an extremely powerful formation. Not only could the old woman avoid being hunted down by the divine generals of the heavenly palace of Bishing, but she could also avoid being found by supreme experts or people with various secret techniques or abilities. The meteor that he had accidentally struck with the Anata Tower earlier was extremely likely to be an important component of the concealing formation. Once it had been destroyed, the natural formation had become flawed. A crack had appeared, allowing the old woman to be hunted down by the divine generals again. The radiant God King probably hid there as well to avoid being hunted down for some reason. Senior, we entered this formation accidentally. We had no intention of destroying the formation. It was purely a coincidence, so I hope Senior that can forgive us for the trouble we've caused. Jianchen said apologetically after he understood why everything had happened. It's the will of the heavens. This isn't your fault. The old woman waved her hand and said rather powerlessly. She gazed at the gloomy sky above her with her eyes that had seen many things. Deep exhaustion was present within them. I could even be found when I hid here. Fate cannot be denied. Fate cannot be denied. Since the heavens want me to die, and the heavens want me to pay for my master's crimes, then I'll hand my damned life to you. I'm tired of a life where I can only hide as well. The old woman's voice was filled with a deep sense of powerlessness as the faint presence of death wrapped around her. Is there any reason to be happy about being alive? Is there any reason to fear death? Ha 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 ha. The old woman suddenly laughed aloud. At that moment, she no longer cared about her life anymore. Senior, don't be too pessimistic. Didn't you say that the majesties of the heavenly palace of Bishing were not in agreement about hunting you down? If that's the case, I don't think it's impossible to fix this matter, said Jianqin. Fix it? How would you fix it? If you could fix it, why was I hunted down for all these years, heavily injured many times, where I was only a step away from death? Even my cultivation realm has regressed from chaotic prime to infinite prime because my wounds were too heavy, the old woman said in a chilling fashion. Afterwards, she seemed to lose all her power, leaving in low spirits. Jianqin remained silent when he looked at the lonely figure of the old woman. It's all because of your fault. Now you've done it. Not only is Senior Su doomed because of you, but even I'm doomed because of you. The radiant Godking sat on his bottom after the old woman had left and stared at Jianqin as he sighed. He did not continue to attack Jianqin. From the attack earlier, he could already tell that he was not Jianqin's opponent. I am Jianqin. May I ask how I may refer to you, friend? Jianqin stowed the Anata tower away and walked out of the huge pit created by the tower. He clasped his fist towards the radiant Godking. Who's your friend? The radiant Godking snorted coldly. He resented Jianqin. Without saying much, he turned around and left. Xianming, if you want to hide from that person you speak of, you can hide in the tower. As long as you're in that tower, your presence will vanish from the surroundings completely. It'll be impossible to find your existence whether it's through forecasting or secret techniques. At this moment, the old woman's voice rang out from the distance. The radiant Godking froze when he heard that. His ashen face immediately regained its brightness from before as he ravished in joy. He seemed to see a ray of hope in the darkness he faced after he heard the old woman's words. He had become hopefully again. Suddenly, he turned around and pleaded to Jianqin eagerly. See, can you let me hide in that tower for a while? Once I break through from being a radiant Godking and condense my soul tree, I'll leave immediately. He paused there before continuing. If you help me out, I'll owe you my life. I will definitely do everything I can do to help you if I am of any use in the future. Even though I, Xianming, possess a low cultivation, I still have my father. My father is one of the 8 vice leaders of the Radiant Saint Hall. As soon as he mentioned his father, pride filled Xianming's face. Jianqin looked at the Radiant Godking in surprise. He had never thought that the Radiant Godking would have such a great background, where his father was actually one of the 8 vice leaders of the Radiant Saint Hall. Although he did not know what level of strength the Radiant Saint Hall possessed, he could naturally tell that the Radiant Saint Hall was quite powerful since a Radiant Godking could talk about it so proudly. It's not impossible to let you hide in my tower. However, I need to know who you've offended. Jianqin purposefully said calmly. He had no idea how he should ask about Radiant Saint Masters from Xianming, but it was great now. Xianming had actually come to him, which was in his favor. Xianming immediately became overjoyed when he saw Jianqin agree. However, when he heard what Jianqin said at the end, he immediately appeared innocent. I haven't offended anyone, nor have I provoked anyone. There's just a terrifyingly powerful great demon that has become fixated on us Radiant Godkings. A great demon? Jianqin felt doubt. That's right, a great demon. This great demon appeared suddenly in the past few hundreds of thousand years. He's extraordinarily powerful and specifically hunts down Radiant Godkings. No matter how safe the location where these Radiant Godkings hide are, they still can't escape from him in the end. In the past few years, who knows how many Radiant Godkings have died to his hands. Even I was forced to leave the Radiant Saint Hall in order to avoid this great demon. I planned on hiding in a remote region at the boundary of the Saint's world. But out of pure coincidence, I accidentally entered this natural concealing formation when I passed through this region. When I sensed how powerful this concealing formation was, I just opened a dwelling here and began cultivating here in an attempt to condense a soul tree. I was the first person who arrived here. I stayed here for several 100,000 years. As for Senior Su, she only found this place in the recent few years. Originally, this place was the best hiding place for Senior Su and me because this concealing formation was created naturally, so it could hide the heavenly secrets and render all methods and secret techniques useless. In the end, it was destroyed because you came here. Jianchen laughed dryly. He changed the topic. What kind of strength does your Radiant Saint Hall possess in comparison to the other organizations in the Saints' world? Isn't your father able to protect you as one of the 8 vice leaders? Xianming sighed. Our Radiant Saint Hall is a peak organization in the Saints' world. As one of the 8 vice leaders of the Radiant Saint Hall, he's naturally an expert. However, the Great Demon's strength is just too terrifying. He even heavily injured the leader of our Radiant Saint Hall. My father naturally doesn't have the ability to protect me, so I could only leave the Radiant Saint Hall. Xianming seemed to think of a terrifying scene of the past when he mentioned this. He showed deep fear in his eyes. I never thought that this person would actually be so powerful, where he can hold off the Radiant Saint Hall, a peak organization, all by himself. What I don't understand is why such a powerful expert will lower himself to attack these Radiant God Kings. Perhaps he has some irresolvable grievance with your Radiant Saint Hall? Jianchen asked with much confusion. However, Xianming shook his head to deny it without any hesitation whatsoever. Although I don't know why this great demon is targeting us Radiant God Kings, there is one thing I am certain about. The great demon does not hold deep hatred towards our Radiant Saint Hall. If he really has grievances, he can make our Radiant Saint Hall suffer unimaginable losses with his unrivaled strength. However, he hasn't done that. If you put it like that, this is quite strange. Has he been targeting Radiant God Kings specifically for other reasons? Jianchen murmured. I don't know about that. Anyway, all the Radiant God Kings from our Radiant Saint Hall have been in a constant state of anxiety, due to the Great Demon. They've all begun to flee the Radiant Saint Hall, and hide in various places, afraid that the Great Demon would find them. However, even with that being the case, the Great Demon still found many hidden Radiant God Kings and murdered them. Who knows if this Great Demon has lost his mind or not? He specifically targets peak Radiant God Kings who are about to condense soul trees. Even when people of other cultivation realms are presented before the Great Demon, he would not even glance at them. I've reached the peak of Radiant God King long ago, and I'm about to condense my soul tree. Condensing a soul tree is akin to your infinite prime. It's anything but easy to go from being a God King to an infinite prime. Moreover, we Radiant God Kings experience a difficulty several times greater than going from God King to infinite prime for you due to the unique laws we comprehend, Xianming said in low spirits. As a result, you hid here for several 100,000 years, and you remained as a Radiant God King? Jianchen asked. He learnt an extremely important piece of information from Xianmin. It was more difficult for Radiant Saint Masters to break through compared to fighters. It's not because of my talent. Instead, it's because of the formation. If there are benefits, there are also downsides. The formation can conceal the heavenly secrets and render all methods of forecasting useless, allowing me to live safely. However, it's also because of its existence that the heavenly secrets have been cut off, interfering with the laws, so comprehension became several times more difficult in the formation, preventing me from breaking through the entire time. I dare not go outside without condensing a soul tree. Although a very long time has passed, no one can guarantee that the Great Demon will not suddenly come for me. In order to gain Jianchen's trust and assistance, Xianming said a lot. He explained everything thoroughly, hiding nothing from Jianchen. This was because he knew that he could only survive by relying on Jianchen. Although he had no idea how the damaged tower covered in sword slashes could be extraordinary, he firmly believed what Senior Su had said. Jianchen, the concealing formation is damaged and can probably no longer obscure the heavenly secrets. Do you think I can go in now? I'm afraid that the great demon will discover me if I stay out for too long. Although this place is far enough from the Radiant Saint Hall, you need to know that a peak expert like the great demon tends to have many methods. Xianming looked at Jianchen hopefully, unwilling to show any resentment towards Jianchen anymore. Jianchen smiled slightly. Of course you can. I'm just curious about a lot of things about Radiant Saint Masters, so I might need your guidance and some knowledge about Radiant Saint Masters in the future. At that time, I hope that Brother Xianming would be willing to enlighten me. Xianming was overjoyed. No problem. It's no problem at all. Of course, it's not a problem. As long as it isn't the secrets of our Radiant Saint Hall, everything and anything is fine. Afterwards, Jianchen took out the Anata Tower and let the impatient Xianming in. Heavens, what a large miniature world! Jianchen, the quality of this tower must be impressive. Ah, what terrifying sword chi! There's actually a large region of space that has shattered up ahead. Jay, just how vast is this miniature world? I can actually comprehend laws without any obstructions at all here, unlike in the concealing formation where I felt like I was peering through mist. I can swear that as long as I cultivate in an environment like this, the bottleneck to condensing a soul tree won't be able to keep me trapped for much longer. Xianming exclaimed as soon as he entered the Anata Tower. Jianchen shook his head with a smile as he listened to Xianming's voice. His gaze towards the damaged tower became mixed. He had exposed the Anata Tower several times in the Neptunian Divine Palace. Although the Supreme God Kings could not recognize it with their knowledge, he knew that once the experts behind them heard about the tower's appearance and power, it would be extremely likely that they would be able to guess what the tower was. This was extremely bad for him. After all, these people were not like the old woman, who had no interest in possessing the Anata Tower. I probably can't keep this tower for much longer, Jianchen murmured. The artifact spirit of the Neptunian Divine Palace was right. The Anata Tower was an object of desire. Although he had brought it up from a lower world, it did not belong to him. It would still return to the heavenly palace of Bixing in the end. This was because he had nowhere near enough strength to keep the Anata Tower. Jianchen, I feel like this place isn't as simple as it seems on the surface. At this moment, Kaya emerged from the Anata Tower. She said sternly as she studied the surroundings seriously. Jianchen's face hardened when he heard that. He looked at Kaya with shining eyes. Kaya, what have you discovered? Can you sense a faint, desolate presence in the surroundings? This presence seems to be extremely ancient, with a presence of time, as if it holds endless history. Kaya closed her eyes and sensed the surroundings carefully as she said to Jianchen softly. Jianchen also closed his eyes and sensed carefully, but in the end he shook his head. He sensed nothing. The presence is too thin. It seems like it has merged with the space, becoming part of the surroundings, Kaya continued. Then she paused and said, and I have an extremely strange feeling that is telling me that this concealing formation in outer space is not natural but cast down by someone. What did you say? Jianchen's face immediately changed as he exclaimed from what Kaya had said at the end. He thought of the old woman. The old woman was a grand disciple of the Anata Grand Prime, and she herself was a powerful primordial realm expert. Both her knowledge and insight were extremely broad, yet even she insisted that the formation was natural. How did Kaya conclude it was man-made? My instincts are telling me that this formation is not natural but cast down by someone, Kaya affirmed. Jianchen looked at Kaya silently. Were Kaya's instincts even greater than the old woman's knowledge and insight? But in the next moment, Jianchen's face suddenly changed. He could not help but clutch his chest as confusion and surprise flooded his face. Jianchen, what's wrong? Kaya immediately supported Jianchen, and became concerned when she sensed Jianchen's abnormal behavior. The power of the ancient Skywolf's bloodline within my body has suddenly acted up. It has broken free from my control slightly, Jianchen said grimly. A smear of wonder appeared in Kaya's eyes. She stared at Jianchen, and after a moment of silence, she said in doubt, do you think how the bloodline of the ancient Skywolf is acting up suddenly has something to do with this place? It can't be right? Jianchen shook his head as he struggled to believe Kaya's guess. However, just when Jianchen said that, his eyes suddenly narrowed. Surprise filled his face. He turned his head towards the distance and said, Through the power of the bloodline within me, I can vaguely sense a calling. The calling originates from up ahead. Jianchen's eyes shone extremely brightly. They were sparkling. He stared at the place that was calling towards him as he showed both surprise and doubt. Is it really like what you said, that how the bloodline of the ancient Skywolf has suddenly acted up is related to this place? Let's go over and have a look first, said Kaya. She was also curious. Afterwards, the two of them no longer remained where they were. Immediately, they approached the place that seemed to be calling towards Jianchen. The meteor was very large, but Kaya and Jianchen were both Godkings after all. With their speed, they only took a short while to arrive where the calling was coming from. It was an empty plot of land. The place was deathly silent as far as the eyes could see. There was no vegetation, making it barren. Is it here? Kaya studied the surroundings and asked Jianchen. Jianchen said nothing. He glanced around at the surroundings before closing his eyes. He sensed through the power of the bloodline to search for where the calling came from. It's right here, right beneath my feet. Jianchen opened his eyes and looked at the tough rock beneath him. The senses of his soul immediately radiated out, piercing the ground as an invisible sword. However, when the senses of his soul reached a few thousand meters deep, a mysterious power obstructed it, and it could no longer travel any further. There seems to be a formation below the ground, said Kaya. Clearly, she had also probed the situation underground with the senses of her soul. Let's open up a path, Jianchen said firmly. He took out the 9-star sword of heavenly ways. As he poured chaotic force into the god artifact, the sword immediately shone with a light that seemed to come from stars. Jianchen swung it and directly struck the ground in an attempt to open up a hole. Boom! With a deafening sound, the tough rock beneath Jianchen immediately shattered. Loose rubble shot off in all directions, exposing a pit that was over 10 meters deep. The meteor was extremely tough. Jianchen's strike was enough to cleave a normal meteorite several tens of thousand meters across in half. Yet he only managed to create a pit here. Jianchen, let me help you. Kaya took action as well. The laws of destruction descended. Like threads, the laws struck the ground one after another. Immediately, deafening booms constantly rang out. Under Jianchen and Kaya's combined attacks, the ground shook violently. Web-like cracks appeared as dust filled the surroundings like a dense mist. Under their continuous attacks that were on par with attacks of supreme god kings, the tunnel rapidly deepened. But the deeper they went, the tougher the rock became. As a result, as the tunnel grew longer, their advance became slower and slower. In the end, it took Jianchen and Kaya 3 days to dig a hole that was several thousand meters deep. They saw the formation hidden beneath the ground. Before them, there was a simple, stone door that seemed to have existed since time immemorial. It was like it had existed through all ages. The formations engraved on the door were extremely profound. They seemed to contain the truths of the world and hid endless mysteries. It also gave off a terrifying killing intent that sent chills running down spines. Kaya stared at the formation on the stone door closely as she became stern. She said grimly, I can sense that this formation is very terrifying. It's extremely terrifying. It's countless times more terrifying than the formation we encountered earlier. Jianchen stared at the simple, stone door ahead as he remained silent. He stood before the stone door, and the power of the ancient Skywolf's bloodline seemed to bubble. Not only did it act up with great intensity, giving off a burning presence, but it even seemed like it wanted to break free from his control and burst out of his body. The activity of the power of the bloodline allowed Jianchen to confirm that this place was either related to the ancient Skywolf, or there was something that could call the power of the ancient Skywolf's bloodline from afar behind the stone door. From how profound the formation on the stone door seems, the concealing formation outside really might not have been naturally created. Instead, it might have been personally cast down by a peak expert who had reached the limits of cultivation. However, what I don't understand is why a killing formation of a clearly lower level appear in this powerful concealing formation. Jianchen asked in confusion. He could still remember that he and Kaya had been forced into the Anata Tower by a killing formation as soon as they had entered the concealing formation. The killing formation was indeed very powerful, but it could not kill infinite primes at all. Compared to the concealing formation that could obscure the heavenly secrets and render the searching methods of peak experts useless, they were on two completely different levels. Because that killing formation was set up by Xianming in the past. At this moment, an old voice rang out from behind. The old woman had appeared behind Jianqin and Kaya at a certain time, hovering there silently. As one of the 8 vice leaders of the Radiant Saint Hall, Xianming's father gave Xianming many items to save his life. The killing formation you encountered in the concealing formation was cast down by Xianming through a formation disc. It was to prevent outsiders from entering this place, explained the old woman. Then she looked at Kaya and said, "Girl, it looks like you are anything but simple. Even I could not see through the secrets of this concealing formation, making me believe it was formed naturally the entire time. Yet you saw through it with a single glance. You overpraise me, Senior. Junior only had a gut feeling," Kaya replied modestly. The old woman looked at Kaya deeply and said, "If it really was a gut feeling, your gut feelings are far too terrifying." Jianqin coughed gently and pointed at the stone door. He changed the topic of the conversation. "Senior, let's study this stone door instead. Does Senior have any way to get through the formations on this stone door?" The old woman sighed gently. "Let's go. Let's leave here. Don't I the stone door? Although I too am interested in the secret behind the stone door very much, this stone door is not something we can touch because the formation on it makes even me shiver in fear. If I've seen correctly, the formation should come from a Grand Exalt. Only a Grand Exalt, someone who has become an existence equivalent to laws and can twist the laws to their whim, can cast a concealing formation to the level where it would seem like it had formed naturally. This formation cannot be broken. Those who try will die." The old woman stared at the stone door and said extremely sternly. With that, she turned around and left. Jianqin did not plan on leaving. He stared at the stone door quietly, and after hesitating for a while, he made up his mind in the end, and let go of the power of the ancient Skywolf's bloodline within him. Without Jianqin's restraints, the power immediately turned into a blood-red light, and shot out of Jianqin's body towards the stone door. When the power of the ancient Skywolf's bloodline came in contact with the formation on the stone door, it immediately seeped in. At the same time, the Grand Exalt's formation on the stone door immediately erupted with blinding light. At that moment, the tremendous energy hidden within the formation seemed to have been awakened. As it surged, the entire meteor rumbled violently as it gave off a devastating presence. "Who let you act recklessly?" Nearby, the old woman's face suddenly changed. She looked back at Jianqin and Kaya and called out to them. She looked at the simple stone door in undisguised fear, and with a flash, she arrived behind Jianqin and Kaya. She grabbed them by the shoulders and was ready to leave as quickly as possible. However, in the next moment, the old woman's movements halted. Surprise filled her old face, and she immediately stared at the stone door with shining eyes. Under the surging pulses of energy, the Grand Exalt's formation on the stone door began to part slowly. In just a while, the Grand Exalt's formation that struck fear into the old woman's heart had completely vanished. Only a droplet of bright red blood hovered there. "What's this all about?" This development stunned the old woman. She stared at the blood deeply and said, "Where did you get this droplet of blood from?" "This is the power of the ancient Skywolf's bloodline. I obtained it accidentally on the spatial battleship I was on with Senior," Jianqin said. He already understood that the old woman was not someone who harbored evil intentions, so he trusted the old woman to a certain degree. "It's actually the power of the ancient Skywolf's bloodline." The old woman sighed in surprise. She stared at the simple stone door that seemed to have existed since time immemorial and said to herself, "Maybe this place was left behind by the past Grand Exalt, the ancient Skywolf? Or maybe this is where the ancient Skywolf passed away in meditation." "Senior, the ancient Skywolf is a past Grand Exalt?" Jianqin was surprised. Just as the name suggested, past Grand Exalts were naturally Grand Exalts who appeared in the past. They no longer existed. The old woman clearly knew some secret rumors about Grand Exalts. She said slowly, "That's right. The ancient Skywolf is indeed a Grand Exalt that appeared in history. The time when he existed was before the 7 Grand Exalts, in an aeon far earlier." From the moment the Saints' world was created till now, probably no one knows how long it has existed for apart from peak experts like Grand Exalts. This endless period of time has been split into many eons. Who knows how many eons it has already been? But according to my knowledge, the aeon before the 7 Grand Exalts was the ancient Skywolf's aeon. Only when all the peak experts of that aeon died did the aeon of the 7 Grand Exalts begin. In other words, there have been many Grand Exalts in the Saints' world across all this time. Jianchen sighed emotionally. Naturally. Who knows how many eons have passed already in the Saints' world? There are Grand Exalts in every aeon. Memories flooded the old woman's eyes as she murmured. Many years ago when I was beside my master, I was fortunate enough to see the First Majesty of the Heavenly Palace of Bisheng. I remember that the First Majesty said something to my master back then. She said that although the Saints' world has been through many eons, it's impossible for the number of Grand Exalts in a single major world to exceed 10 for every aeon. When she reached there, the woman scoffed. People say that once you reach godhood, you break free from the limitations of age and gain eternal life, allowing you to become as old as the world. But in reality, no one can truly attain eternal life. Even the Grand Exalts who comprehend laws to the limit and literally become an embodiment of laws themselves can also die. For example, in that battle 3 million years ago, the 7 Grand Exalts still died or became injured. Even my Grandmaster, the Anata Grand Prime, met his end. Even Grand Exalts are unable to truly attain eternal life, let alone the people below Grand Exalt. What eternal life? What becoming as old as the world? In my eyes, it's all a joke. Towards the end, the old woman laughed crazily as if she had managed to see through life and death. Was there any reason to be happy about being alive? Was there any reason to fear death? At this moment, Jianchen had arrived before the simple stone door. He pushed the heavy door open slowly. Immediately, a dense and pure presence of desolation surged out. It contained the presence of the laws of the world. As Jianchen was at the very front, this presence struck him first, causing his mind to shudder. As the presence brushed past him, he immediately felt like he had fused with the world. He closed his eyes and seemed to be able to see the 3,000 ways that had woven into a net, allowing him to sense them all. He reached out and seemed to be able to clutch them firmly. It felt like he could grasp them. The old woman's mind also shuddered. Surprise filled her voice as she cried out uncontrollably. Is this the legendary origin of ways? The old woman's expression was extremely complicated. Unlike Jianchen, she knew exactly how precious and rare the origin of ways was. It was a treasure that could even lead to bloodshed between Grand Primes. The old woman immediately closed her eyes. She tried to comprehend it to the best of her efforts, to absorb the origin of ways. At the same time, Kaya could not help but close her eyes as well. She began to absorb the origin of ways that surged out of the stone door. At this moment, even Kaya herself failed to realize that a black hole had silently appeared in the depths of her sea of consciousness. As soon as the origin of ways entered her body, it surged into the black hole and completely vanished. Ever since the black hole appeared, Kaya absorbed more than half of the origin of ways that had surged out of the stone door. Even Jianchen and the old woman's combined efforts were not enough to match Kaya. The origin of ways. It's actually the origin of ways. Qingsua, wake up quick. The sword spirits that had been slumbering for quite some time in Jianchen's body were alarmed. It really is the origin of ways. This is something left behind when Grand Exalts pass away in meditation, and their souls return to the world. It's one of the most precious things in the world. Ziying sees it all. Afterwards, the sword spirits also took action. Hidden within Jianchen's body, the sword spirits turned into yin and yang qi as they revolved around each other like a yin and yang symbol. As they revolved, a suction immediately appeared, rapidly drawing in the origin of ways. With the sword spirit's assistance, the origin of ways that surged into Jianchen increased by several times over. Under their combined efforts, he managed to absorb 35% of the origin of ways. Kaya absorbed half of it all by herself, while the old woman only managed to absorb 15% in the end. At this moment, the three of them could not help but enter a selfless state as the origin of ways brushed past them. They became submerged in the comprehension of the laws. As a result, none of them realized just how much of the origin of ways the others had absorbed. At this same time, near the Hinyu plain distant from where Jianchen and the others were, the majestic Neptunian divine palace stood there quietly like a primordial beast. Although it had already been several days since the Neptunian divine palace had closed, not all of the experts there had left. However, only 30% remained compared to before. These people gathered before the Neptunian divine palace, maintaining a great distance from the structure. They were either calm, or they stared at the Neptunian divine palace in uncertainty. They did not seem like they planned on leaving. A huge meteor hovered near these people. The solitary sword ancestor with a sword on his back sat on it. He was also waiting there. I come from the Shangyan clan of the Lone Heaven Plain. I represent the Shangyan clan in hopes of meeting the master of the Neptunian divine palace. I am the current person in charge of the Tianhe clan from the God-Barren Plain. I hope I can meet the new master of the Neptunian divine palace and get to know the new master. We come from planet Violet Brilliance of the 81 Great Planets. Similar voices rang out constantly. The people who remained in the area came from large organizations from various places. They learnt that the new master of the Neptunian divine palace was young and possessed a weaker level of cultivation. So they wanted to take advantage of the situation and provide her with assistance so that they could establish ties with her, or even rope her to their side. However, the Neptunian divine palace did not respond at all. The artifact spirit did not respond to their requests. However, these esteemed experts with impressive strength did not become impatient. They waited outside quietly and calmly. Clearly, after Xiao Man became the new master of the Neptunian divine palace, she had become one of the most desired people in the current saints' world. At this moment, the Neptunian divine palace suddenly shone with a dazzling blue light, which made it seem like an ocean that floated in outer space. As this blue light surrounded the Neptunian divine palace, it shot off into the depths of outer space as a streak of light. Many of the experts secretly sighed when they saw this. They did not pursue the divine palace because they knew that they had already lost their chance to befriend the new master. However, not everyone was like that. At this moment, an ancient sword shot through the air and shattered space as it shone brightly. It destroyed the path that the Neptunian divine palace had to pass through, forcing it to a halt. At a certain time, the solitary sword ancestor who originally sat on the meteor had appeared before the Neptunian divine palace. He held his sword as he blocked the structure's way. "Old man, you're blocking my way. What do you want?" The artifact spirit of the Neptunian divine palace appeared. He stood on top of the divine hall with his short stature. He roared at the solitary sword ancestor as he pointed at him. "My disciple's corpse is still in the Neptunian divine palace. This is my disciple's presence. Hand the person over, and I'll leave immediately," the solitary sword ancestor said emotionlessly. With a wave of his hand, a presence that belonged to Gongzheng appeared before the artifact spirit. After sensing the presence silently, the artifact spirit snorted impatiently, "Here's your disciple. Take him and get out of the way." As he said that, a disheveled corpse in tattered clothes flew out of the Neptunian divine palace. Afterwards, the Neptunian divine palace directly shot off and disappeared into the depths of the vast cosmos. The solitary sword ancestor looked at Gongzheng's corpse as he showed sorrow. He extended a finger towards Gongzheng's forehead and used a secret technique. Immediately, the scene before Gongzheng died clearly appeared in the solitary sword ancestor's mind. He personally saw a god artifact shining with starlight stab into Gongzheng's head with lightning speed. Does anyone recognize this person? The solitary sword ancestor's eyes were cold. He extended a finger at the empty space, and Jianchen's face immediately appeared with great clarity. "It's Jianchen. He's Jianchen." Immediately, a few supreme god kings who remained beside their seniors and still had not left called out, "He's Jianchen? That person who helped the girl the entire time in the Neptunian divine palace?" At this moment, even the seniors beside the supreme god kings were stunned. They were taken aback. "Leave Jianchen behind." The solitary sword ancestor bellowed out as killing intent surged from him. He turned into a resplendent streak of light as he pursued the Neptunian divine palace. The great perfection of sword spirit. I never thought I'd reach the great perfection of sword spirit so soon. Jianchen opened his eyes slowly. His gaze contained undisguised joy as well as excitement. Several years ago, he had reached the major achievement of sword spirit in the Neptunian Divine Palace, allowing his chaotic body to reach the 12th layer and him to become a God King. Originally, he believed that it would definitely take an extremely lengthy period of time for him to break through again and reach the great perfection of sword spirit. However, he had never thought that after just a few years, he would break through again with his way of the sword and reach the great perfection of sword spirit. It was like a wish come true. Not only was the great perfection of sword spirit enough for Jianchen to condense a fourth strand of profound sword qi, but even his chaotic body could formally advance to major achievement. The 13th layer of the chaotic body was major achievement, and the layers after that, the 14th, the 15th, all the way until the 18th, were all a part of major achievement. Beyond the 18th layer was the great perfection of the chaotic body. No one had ever reached it throughout history. The cultivation resources on me right now are plentiful. I have several tens of million fire divine crystals, 2 god-tier heavenly resources of unknown grades from the Grand Prime Space Ring, the harvests from the Divine Medicinal Garden, and resources from the space rings of many Supreme God Kings. These resources should be enough for me to reach the 13th layer of the chaotic body. Jianchen was eager. He had collected over 100 million fire divine crystals in the Neptunian Divine Palace. Even after he had given most of them to his sister, there were still several tens of million left. Jianchen, you've finally awoken. Kaiya's voice rang out from behind. Jianchen dismissed his thoughts when he heard that. He looked back and discovered that Kaiya and the old woman had already awakened. They stood nearby and stared at him. How long have I been comprehending? Jianchen asked before looking at Kaiya. He discovered that Kaiya had already reached the peak of mid-God King now. Kaiya's progress surprised Jianchen very much. After all, when Kaiya had been cultivating in the Tianyuan clan before, her rate of advance was just startling. It could be said that Kaiya went from the origin realm to overgod in a single stroke. Yet, he discovered that Kaiya's cultivation speed had decreased dramatically after becoming a God King, which left him perplexed. Kaiya glanced at the old woman before saying to Jianchen, I was the first to awaken. If we go from when I roused, you've been comprehending for a month. Little brother, it looks like your luck is pretty impressive to be able to find something as precious as the origin of ways. Even I've benefited from you. Not only have I completely recovered from my injuries through the origin of ways, but my comprehension of laws has deepened as well. The old woman looked at Jianchen with mixed emotions. The origin of ways? Senior, was the presence before the origin of ways? Jianchen asked out of curiosity. That's right, it was the origin of ways. The origin of ways is extremely precious in the saints' world, so precious that even Grand Primes would be willing to go as far as shed blood for it. This is because the origin ways comes from when sovereigns of the world who had comprehended to the limits of laws pass away in meditation. The origin of ways is condensed from their cultivation, a crystallization of laws. Only those who have not reached the level of grand exalts can benefit greatly when they absorb the origin of ways. There are 2 ways for grand exalts to die. One of them is for them to die in battle against similar experts. All grand exalts who pass away like this will not leave behind the origin of ways. The other way is for them to pass away in meditation like the ancient Skywolf, where they vanish from the world. Only when grand exalts pass away in meditation like the ancient Skywolf would they leave behind the origin of ways, the old woman explained to Jianchen at a steady pace. Then she looked at Jianchen with shining eyes. Do you understand how precious the origin of ways is now? So that's how the origin of ways comes about. Jianchen was perturbed. He stared at the stone doorway with mixed feelings and said, I never thought that this would be where the ancient Skywolf passed away. Jianchen sighed gently. He deeply bowed towards the simple, stone doorway out of respect. Only then did he go through it. After stepping through the doorway, Jianchen immediately felt like he had left the saint's world and come to an alternative space. He knew that the stone doorway was like a tunnel through space. The moment he strode through it, he had entered a miniature world. Jianchen studied the surroundings and discovered that the miniature world was not large. It was rather empty. Apart from the small, wooden hut encased by a barrier at the end of the world, there was only a droplet of blood that hovered in the center. The blood was the size of a thumb. It hovered there silently like a ruby. When Jianchen saw the droplet of blood, his mind immediately shuddered as his eyes narrowed. This was because he could feel a tremendous energy within the droplet of blood, causing the inconspicuous blood to possess devastating energy. This droplet of blood should be the ancient Skywolf's essence blood. Only grand exalts, sovereigns of the world that embody the very laws themselves, can leave behind a droplet of essence blood that remains just as powerful as before, even after who knows how long. The old woman and Kaya also arrived. The old woman stared at the droplet of blood extremely sternly and said in thought, "The energy in the blood is enough to frighten even me. If it erupts, probably even peak chaotic primes can't survive. Be careful. Don't touch the blood." However, before the old woman had finished speaking, the droplet of frightening blood suddenly shook gently. Afterwards, under the shocked gaze of the old woman, the blood gradually approached the power of the bloodline that had come from Jianchen. All of their eyes narrowed when they saw this. Their hearts pounded uncontrollably as they felt afraid and uneasy. It had to be mentioned that the blood had been purposefully left behind by the past Grand Exalt, the ancient Skywolf. It was so powerful and terrifying that it frightened even the old woman. If an accident really occurred, and the terrifying energy in the blood erupted, the consequences would be unthinkable. Jianchen had already taken out the Anata Tower. He looked at the two droplets of blood nervously. He was preparing for the worst-case scenario. In the end, the two droplets of blood finally approached each other and slowly merged, turning into a droplet of blood that was larger. The energy inside was peaceful, no longer unstable. With this, all three of them felt relieved. They could finally calm their restless hearts. "Have a look if you can still control the blood," the old woman said to Jianchen. Jianchen nodded. Immediately, he used his connection with the power of the bloodline to try control it. Immediately, the power of the bloodline that had fused with the ancient Skywolf's essence blood seemed to receive some kind of calling, flying towards Jianchen. Jianchen was overjoyed. He could actually control the power of the bloodline like before. However, he no longer dared to make the power of the bloodline return to his body. Instead, he made it hover before his eyes. He studied it sternly and seriously to confirm that there would be no problems or issues with the blood. After a close inspection, Jianchen discovered that the power of the bloodline had not merged with the ancient Skywolf's essence blood properly. It seemed more like the power of the bloodline had surrounded the essence blood, rapidly absorbing the tremendous energy within the essence blood to strengthen itself. Even though the essence blood had been left behind by a past Grand Exalt, it only contained terrifying energy now. It completely allowed the power of the bloodline to rapidly devour its energy without resisting at all. Jianchen was exulted with this. He had just been worrying that the power of the ancient Skywolf's bloodline could not increase, so as his personal strength increased, the assistance it would provide would become minuscule. However, he had never thought that he would have such a great fortuitous encounter, accidentally finding a droplet of essence blood from the ancient Skywolf. It's just a pity that the energy in the essence blood can only be absorbed by the power of the bloodline that shares the same origins. Otherwise, it will resist instinctively and lead to severe consequences. It looks like it'll still take quite some time before the power of the bloodline completely absorbs the essence blood, Jianchen thought. He completely stopped worrying and allowed the power of the bloodline back into his body. Afterwards, Jianchen looked at the small, wooden hut enveloped by a barrier. Since the miniature world was where the ancient Skywolf had passed away, it went without saying that the wooden hut contained the ancient Skywolf's legacy. This was a Grand Exalt's legacy. Even though Jianchen cultivated the chaotic body, it was an irresistible temptation. Don't fantasize about it. It's impossible for you to get through the barrier because it's a bloodline barrier. Only members of the Wolf clan with the power of the ancient Skywolf's bloodline have the right to enter. Although you possess the power of the ancient Skywolf's bloodline, you're still a human in the end, said the old woman. Although the old woman said that, Jianchen did not give up. This was a Grand Exalt's legacy after all. It tempted him so much that he struggled to remain calm. Afterwards, Jianchen let out the power of the bloodline once again in an attempt to pass through the barrier. However, Jianchen failed this time. Using the power of the bloodline as a support, he tried everything he could think of, but it all resulted in failure in the end. It was as if the old woman was right, and only members of the Wolf clan could enter. Don't even think about attacking the barrier and wasting all of its energy because this was personally cast down by a Grand Exalt. That will never work, the old woman added at the end. With that, she turned around and left. Jianchen looked at the indestructible barrier in pity. He sighed helplessly. He knew that the ancient Skywolf's legacy was not something that he could possess, so in the end, he could only leave reluctantly with Kaya. After passing through the stone doorway, the two of them returned to the barren meteor. They flew out from the hole they had dug and discovered the old woman standing on its edge, staring at the dark sky sternly. They've come. They've come faster than I imagined. The concealing formation has gradually become useless. The old woman stood there and sighed deeply. Is it the divine generals of the heavenly palace of Bishing? Jianchen also frowned and stared at the pitch-black sky that had no starlight. He became rather nervous. The Anata Tower was still on him. That's right, it's them. They're the most loyal guards of the heavenly palace of Bishing. Every single divine general has been picked from countless prodigies after tight screenings. All of them have received the full support of the heavenly palace of Bishing, so they're all extremely powerful. Only those supreme prodigies can match these divine generals, making them very difficult to deal with, the old woman said slowly. Then she looked at Jianchen and Kaya and said sincerely, the two of you should go quick. You should leave here before the divine generals arrive just in case it leads to any unnecessary problems. The origin of ways from before should have all been yours, but I couldn't control myself, so I absorbed some of it. As a result, I owe you a favor. However, I am in trouble now. And after fleeing for all those years, I've used up everything I have. As a result, I probably can't return this favor, the old woman said in some shame. Senior, why don't you enter the tower? We can escape together. Jianchen took out the Anata Tower and said to the old woman. The old woman was not a bad person. She had only been hunted down because of her master. He really wanted to help her out. The old woman shook her head. She said bitterly, after fleeing for all those years, I've grown weary. I don't want to live a life on the run anymore. I'm choosing to die here, to die where the ancient Skywolf passed away. It's quite the honor for me. The old woman looked at Jianchen deeply. I must warn you sincerely that the tower in your hands is an object of desire. It's impossible for you to keep it with your strength, so find the time to return it to the heavenly palace of Bishing. You must bear in mind that the tower cannot end up in the hands of the divine generals. Otherwise, this great merit would be stolen away by them. You must go to the heavenly palace of Bishing personally and return it. Only then will you benefit the most. You might even receive the protection of the First Majesty of the heavenly palace of Bishing. In the current Saints world, being able to receive the protection of the First Majesty is more important than anything else because the First Majesty is one of the most powerful existences in the Saints world apart from Grand Exalts. Boom. At this moment, a deafening rumble rang out from the sky, and a pulse of energy that frightened Jianchen wreaked havoc in outer space. The sudden occurrence made all three of their expressions change. Oh no, they've actually arrived so quickly. They must have used secret techniques and directly teleported over from somewhere distant. It looks like they're determined to kill me this time. They don't want to give me any time to catch my breath, the old woman said gravely. Then she glanced at Jianchen and Kaya and said urgently, the two of you go. Leave here as quickly as possible. Don't get caught up accidentally. With that, the old woman shot off into the sky. She unleashed her presence at the primordial realm without holding back at all, charging into outer space with determination and a spirit that did not fear death. She went to fight the divine generals who hunted her down one last time. The concealing formation outside the meteor had already shattered, and a damaged formation disk fell out of space, turning to dust. Xianming had cast down this formation disk. It was quite of impressive quality, and it could kill infinite primes. However, under the attacks of the divine generals, it had already shattered before it was of any use. Without the obstruction of the formation, the concealed starlight appeared before Jianchen and Kaya once again. However, the two of them were in no mood to admire the enchanting starry sky. Instead, they stared up ahead sternly. Booms rang out in outer space in a grand fashion. He could clearly see the old woman locked in an intense battle against two experts shining with golden light. Primordial realm laws interwove as they clashed in the most intense fashion. It was devastating to the point where even the celestial bodies seemed to dim. The entire region of space trembled as cracks appeared one after another. Kaya, let's go. Jianchen glanced at the frightening pulses of energy in outer space one last time before taking out a small spaceship from his space ring without any hesitation, leaving with Kaya in the other direction. It was impossible for him to interfere in the battle between the old woman and the two divine generals. Even after reaching the great perfection of sword spirit, he would be of no help at all. Bang! Just when the spaceship flew off the meteor, it seemed to collide against an invisible wall. It shook violently, coming to a sudden halt. Oh no, it's a spatial barrier. The divine generals have sealed up this space. We can't escape. Jianchen cried out as his expression became extremely ugly. Doesn't that mean we can't leave? Kaya's face changed slightly as well. Jianchen stood within the small spaceship as he looked at the battle between the three in the distance uneasily. With a flip of his hand, he took out the Cosmic Movement Talisman. Jianchen was about to use the Cosmic Movement Talisman, but he was hesitating. This was his last Cosmic Movement Talisman. He really was reluctant to use it unless he faced death. He understood that the divine generals of the Heavenly Palace of Bishing would not be hostile towards him. After all, his brother Mingdong was the 9th Majesty of the Heavenly Palace of Bishing. With that, the divine generals would never create any trouble for him. What he truly worried about was whether the two divine generals were able to sense the Anata Tower. If they could sense the Anata Tower would definitely leave with them. At this moment, Kaya grabbed Jianchen's hand and stopped him from activating the Cosmic Movement Talisman. She said, "We're not facing death right now, so let's not use the talisman yet. Perhaps this won't develop horribly." "Let's hope so." Jianchen's hand around the Cosmic Movement Talisman loosened. He stared at the intense battle in outer space sternly. The old woman fought the two divine generals at the same time, engaging in an extremely intense battle. Like streams of light, laws clashed time and time again. The collapsed space caused countless stars to dim. The old woman appeared to be defeated soon after they had begun fighting. Very soon, she vomited blood from the battle against the two divine generals, having been knocked away. She just happened to fly in the direction of Jianchen's small spaceship. Jianchen hesitated slightly before flying out of the spaceship and catching the old woman when he saw this. The old woman's face was extremely pale, and she was covered in blood. She coughed a few times violently and said with a hoarse, frail voice, "You can't interfere with this matter, so don't get drawn into it." That was what she said on the surface, but Jianchen heard another voice. "Do not take out the Anata Tower. As long as you hide the Anata Tower, it's impossible for the two divine generals to discover it." The old woman's message made Jianchen settle down. He finally became relieved. At the same time, the sword spirits hid deeply as well. The current Jianchen was no longer the puny cultivator from the past. As his strength rapidly increased, he became better at hiding himself. Coupled with the cooperation of the sword spirits, he was confident that even chaotic primes would not be able to discover the sword spirits when he faced them. Suddenly, Jianchen became blinded by golden light. He turned his head to look over, and saw that the two divine generals had appeared nearby like they had teleported in their special, golden armor. Their armor shone with the blinding light that was as dazzling as the sun. Basking under the golden hue, the two divine generals became hazy and blurry, making them seem just like gods, where they were holy and inviolable. Immediately, Jianchen felt his body sink. His clothes became pressed against his body tightly, as if they were under some sort of pressure. The terrifying presence from the two divine generals made Jianchen feel like he was carrying a mountain. He also felt like he was suffocating. Chaotic primes. Jianchen's heart shivered as he became extremely stern. Kaya also flew out of the spaceship and arrived beside Jianchen. She also stared at the two divine generals sternly and cautiously. However, the two divine generals did not even glance at Jianchen and Kaya. In their eyes, Godkings were no different from ants. Jianchen and Kaya failed to interest them at all. The two of them looked at the old woman, and one of them growled, "Su Ran, you're done for this time. Su Ran, you have already been on the run for millions of years. You must be tired. The two of us have chased you for millions of years as well, so we're tired as well. Let's end this permanently this time so that we can return and report the completion of this mission." One of the divine generals sighed gently. The feelings in his voice were rather mixed. Su Ran's master was a disciple of the Anata Grand Exalt, while they were loyal guards raised diligently by the heavenly palace of Bisheng. They all possessed many secret techniques, including several ones for escape. As a result, this pursuit and escape lasted for millions of years. Only today could it finally come to an end. I have indeed become tired after running for so many years. Dying in your hands today is like liberation. Do it, the old woman said calmly. She had already accepted death. She was truly ready to face death. But the two of them have nothing to do with me. They've only arrived here accidentally, so I hope you don't make things difficult for them. The old woman glanced at Jianchen and Kaya in some shame. Jianchen could see the shame in the old woman's eyes. He could tell that this sense of shame came from the origin of ways. "Only you are a part of our mission," said one of the divine generals. They did not pay any attention to Jianchen and Kaya at all. The old woman smiled sadly. "Everything is all caused by the same person. Although my master allowed me to stand where I do today, I will also be dying because of him. However, before I die, I still must tell you that not only did I have no idea about my master's past mistake, but I also had nothing to do with it either." At the same time, on a continent extremely distant from the old woman's location, a hazy figure shrouded in light sat on a throne within a majestic golden hall. Laws revolved around this person and shone brightly such that they seemed to have fused with the hazy figure completely, making them inseparable. This was truly fusing with the laws of the world and becoming a part of them. This person represented the supreme level of cultivation in the universe. At this moment, the hazy figure opened her eyes. What kind of eyes were they? They were icy, emotionless, colorless, and cold. Its gaze was enchanting, as if it could peer into the past and the future with a single glance and see the mysteries of the universe. Hall Spirit. At this moment, the person spoke. Her voice was cold and seemed to possess all the voices in the world, providing no detail about any features of the person whatsoever. "Master." A ruddy, benevolent old man silently appeared. He stood below in a bow, greeting the figure on the throne politely. "From this moment onwards, stop hunting down Su Ran," the figure said coldly. "Yes, master." The figure on the throne seemed to possess infinite authority. Every single action and word represented the will of the world. Like he had received an imperial edict, the ruddy old man immediately carried out the order without asking for the reason at all. In the next moment, a wondrous mental pulse radiated out from the majestic hall. It passed through space and time, arriving in the minds of the two divine generals instantly. "Su Ran, we already know that you were drawn into this matter by the seventh majesty, as the first majesty never took a stance. We don't want to kill you either, but the hall spirit has given orders. Unless the majesties stand forward to protect you, we can't disobey," a divine general said, but his voice came to a sudden halt. Immediately, he glanced at the other divine general in surprise. "Hall Spirit? Ha 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 ha, it's actually the Hall Spirit. The person that wanted me dead was actually the artifact spirit of the heavenly palace of Bisheng." The old woman laughed sadly. She originally believed that one of the majesties had passed down orders to kill her, but she had never thought it would actually be the artifact spirit of the heavenly palace of Bisheng. The two divine generals looked at Su Ran with complicated gazes. After a moment of silence, one of them said, "Su Ran, congratulations. From today onwards, you are truly free." With that, the two divine generals slowly withdrew their presences and no longer bore any killing intent. Congratulations? Aha. Do the two of you want to scoff at me before you kill me? Fair enough. I've made you go on a wild goose chase for several millions of years. It has taken up quite a lot of your time that could have been spent on cultivation. I even injured the two of you during this time, so I can understand that you have resentment towards me. If that's the case, scoff all you want, and then give me a quick death. Liberate me. The old woman smiled sadly. The two divine generals knew that the old woman had misunderstood. They sighed helplessly and explained, "The Hall Spirit has sent orders to stop hunting you down from today onwards." The old woman was stunned when she heard that. She stopped laughing, and she stared at the two divine generals blankly. Disbelief filled her face. What did you say?" Only a while later did the old woman ask blankly. "The Hall Spirit has retracted the order to hunt you down. Su Ran, you are no longer a target of us, so congratulations, you are truly free," one of the divine generals said again. The old woman was completely dumbstruck, as if she was unable to process that. Quite a while later, she smiled idiotically and murmured, "I'm free. I'm free. I'm actually free again." The old woman laughed louder and louder, where she seemed like she had become insane at the end. In all these years of being hunted down, she had looked forward to and hoped that the majesties of the heavenly palace of Bishing could look into the matter and deem her innocent countless times. She hoped that they would not draw her into her master's past mistakes. This was because she was truly innocent. She had no idea that her master had committed such a sin in the past. But unfortunately, she had waited painfully for so long while being on the run, but the divine generals continued to hunt her down relentlessly. This made her understand the brutal truth that perhaps the majesties of the heavenly palace of Bishing really did not care about her at all. In other words, whether she was related to the matter at all, and whether she died or not, would not raise the attention of the majesties at all. The first majesty in particular could look into the matter and clear her name easily with the former's shocking level of cultivation. In reality, from how the first majesty never personally took action against her, Su Ren already understood that the first majesty knew she was innocent, but she said nothing for her. The actions of the majesties from the heavenly palace of Bishing allowed Su Ran to understand something quite some time ago. The majesties never targeted her. But it was also because of this that they would not stand forward for her. They did not take her seriously. Otherwise, how would she still be alive today? After all, she was only a chaotic prime when she was at her peak condition. Across all the great planes and planets of the Saints' world, chaotic primes were experts who could reign over an entire region. They were existences of great status, but they were nothing before the heavenly palace of Bishing. As a result, after fleeing for her life for so many years, Su Ran gradually gave up on the hopes of living. She knew that she was going to die and only hoped for liberation. But she had never thought that when she truly gave up on living and was about to die, the heavenly palace of Bishing would rescind their initial order. The two divine generals did not stay for long. After declaring that they had received orders to spare Su Ran, the two of them directly flew towards where the ancient Skywolf had passed away in cultivation. They were chaotic primes, so they had discovered the dwelling as soon as they arrived here. However, they were in no shape to think about it as they fought Su Ran earlier. The stone door to the dwelling remained wide open. When Jianchen emerged from there, he did want to close the door again, but he was unable to find a method. As a result, he could only allow the doorway to remain open, allowing the two divine generals to enter the dwelling without any obstruction. However, they did not stay in there for long. They left after just a short while, hurrying back to the heavenly palace of Bishing to report their success. "Congratulations on your new life, senior." Jianchen clasped his fist at the old woman and congratulated her sincerely after the two divine generals had left. By now, the old woman had gradually calmed down. She stared at the vast, starry sky above her head and sighed deeply. The emotions in her eyes were extremely mixed. After a moment of silence, she said slowly, "The concealing formation has already shattered, and the heavenly secrets here have now become exposed. Before long, those peak experts who are skilled at foreseeing things will sense this place. It'll become a place of trouble very soon. We can't stay here." The old woman glanced at the small spaceship behind her and said to Jianchen and Kaya, "It'll be extremely dangerous for you to move through outer space with your strength. It'll be very difficult for you to fend off primordial realm space beasts once you encounter them, so let's go. I'll leave with you." With that, the old woman directly made her way towards the spaceship nearby. Jianchen and Kaya looked at each other before making their way towards the spaceship as well. Before long, the spaceship turned into a streak of light and left the place. "Where are you going to next?" The old woman sat in the spaceship as she rested and healed. In thought, Jianchen said, "Senior, to be honest, we're lost in space. Right now, we only want to find a place where there are teleportation formations that can transport us to another plane. We're going to decide where we go next after that." The old woman nodded. A while later, she said, "The closest place is planet Tianming of the 81 Great Planets. I have the spatial coordinates of planet Tianming, so let's go there for now." Planet Tianming. Jianchen was surprised. Afterwards, he obtained the coordinates from the old woman, and they directly made their way towards the planet. "My wounds are rather heavy. Xianming's abilities as a radiant Godking can assist me in healing. Without the concealing formation, Xianming can't come out, so let me into the tower," said the old woman. "Yes, senior," Jianchen answered straightforwardly and immediately took out the Anata tower. "My name is Su Ran." You must have learnt it from the two divine generals already. I don't need that much respect, and coupled with what happened with the origin of ways, I owe you a huge favor, so there's no need for you to be so polite with me. You can just call me by my name. Remember, if you encounter any dangers outside, you must contact me immediately. After telling Jianchen some things, Su Ran vanished into the Anata tower. Afterwards, Jianchen steered the small spaceship through the vast outer space in a straight path. He had already broken through with the way of the sword, so his chaotic body could reach the 13th layer now. However, he could encounter various dangers at any time in outer space, so Jianchen needed to maintain his greatest vigilance at all times. As a result, it was impossible for him to cultivate here peacefully. He could only delay the breakthrough. After flying through space for 5 years, Su Ran finally made a full recovery under Xianming's assistance. When she emerged from the Anata tower, they no longer used the spaceship of poorer quality and limited speed. Instead, she carried Jianchen and Kaya with her as she moved through outer space with her own cultivation. They were countless times faster than the spaceship. After another year of traveling like this, they finally arrived at their destination, planet Tianming. Jianchen stared at the huge planet from outer space, and he was greatly shocked. Just the diameter of the planet had left him stumped. He had no idea how wide it was. That was how large the planet was. If it was flattened, it would basically be the same size as the cloud plane. The Saints' world has a total of 81 great planets. Planet Tianming ranks towards the bottom, but no matter how low its ranking is, there are still many large organizations and clans on them. Even during my peak, I dared not stand against them, so don't act recklessly on planet Tianming. Su Ran said to Jianchen and Kaya sternly. There's a rather special organization on planet Tianming. It's called the Empyrean Demon Cult. Even though their strongest experts on the planet are only infinite primes, bear in mind that you should never provoke them. In the past, the strongest expert of planet Tianming, the planet lord who ruled the entire planet, was slain by a supreme expert of the Empyrean Demon Cult, because he had provoked the Empyrean Demon Cult. His head was hung high up above the planet lord's estate. An undetectable cold light immediately flashed through Jianchen's eyes when he heard the Empyrean Demon Cult again. He could still clearly remember how he and Kaya had been hunted down by one of the vice leaders, Huayan, on the cloud plane. He could remember every moment of when they fled desperately to the Blood Sun Empire. He was only an overgod back then. Against Huayan, who had reached the primordial realm, he was literally helpless. If it were not for the Divine King, who kept Huayan busy for a while, he probably would not have been able to escape to the Blood Sun Empire. However, even with that being the case, Huayan still pursued them to the imperial capital of the Blood Sun Empire. If a primordial realm expert from the Blood Sun Empire did not intervene and stop Huayan, Jianchen and Kaya probably would not have been able to board the spatial battleship and leave the cloud plane. It could be said that they had left against their wills, forced to do so by the vice leader of the Empyrean demon cult. Huayan Jianchen did not even have the chance to bid farewell to the people of the Tianyuan clan. Naturally, he held extremely deep resentment for Huayan. I wonder if I can kill Huayan once I reach the 13th layer of the chaotic body, Jianchen pondered. He could not help but tighten his fist. He was rather eager to increase his strength. Senior Su Ran, I want to stay on planet Tianming for a while. I need to enter seclusion immediately and raise my strength. I don't plan on leaving until I break through. Jianchen quickly made up his mind and said to Su Ran. Su Ran thought about it a little and nodded. That works too. I just happen to need some time for cultivation as well. Although I've already recovered from my wounds, I still need quite a lot of time to recover my lost cultivation so that I can return to my peak condition. Afterwards, the three of them landed on planet Tianming together. They were about to find a city as a temporary place to settle down in, but when they passed through a divine kingdom, they saw a battlefield in the distance where smoke rose up everywhere. An army composed of many origin realm and godhood cultivators were engaged in a battle of life and death, leading to so much bloodshed that it formed rivers. In the sky, powerful energy formed storms that wreaked havoc in the surroundings. Several dozen Godkings engaged in an intense battle. It's the Empyrean demon cult. Looking at the demonic aura that occupied half the sky, Jianchen could tell with a single glance that one side belonged to the Empyrean demon cult, as he had also gone through something similar. As he watched soldiers constantly die on the battlefield, Jianchen fell silent. He felt sorrow for their deaths from the bottom of his heart. He already knew that the Empyrean demon cult waged wars constantly in different places not to increase their strength. Rather, it was to collect the essence, blood and soul energy of all the cultivators who died in the war. After that, they could condense blood beads and soul beads through a powerful formation. After sighing secretly, Jianchen did not stay there for much longer. He traveled off into the distance. Before long, they stopped in the imperial capital of an ancient empire called Thousand Leaf. Not only are there powerful formations protecting this city, but the origin energy here is also several times denser than outside. Let's just stay here for now. Su Ran looked at the grand city and said to Jianchen and Kaya. But very soon, her expression became extremely strange. She stared at Jianchen deeply and said, "You better disguise yourself." Disguise myself? Jianchen was surprised when he heard that. He looked at the city up ahead like he was in thought as he immediately began to disguise himself. Before long, he and Kaya had adopted a completely different appearance. Concealing their presences, they entered the city with Su Ran. As soon as they set foot in the city, Jianchen saw many wanted posters depicting him. The side of the image depicted his various characteristics, including the techniques he was skilled in, what kind of laws he used, and so on. The people who have set a bounty on me is actually the solitary sword lineage. When Jianchen saw the 3 words on the bottom of the poster, his face hardened. As long as you provide a tip that leads to Jianchen, you can obtain a vast amount of wealth from the solitary sword ancestor, and he'll owe you a favor. If you can directly capture Jianchen and hand over him to the solitary sword ancestor, he'll include 3 chances for the solitary sword ancestor to take action personally for whatever is needed. TSK. I never would have thought that this young man called Jianchen would actually be so valuable. Through him, it's possible to obtain 3 chances of asking a Grand Prime to take action personally. Moreover, the person is the solitary sword ancestor. The solitary sword ancestor is a famed figure across the saints' world. Even among Grand Primes, he's quite the expert. Su Ran glanced at Jianchen mysteriously and sighed emotionally. Right? The solitary sword ancestor is a renowned peak expert of the current saints' world. A single favor from him is enough to interest many everlasting empires and peak organizations, let alone being able to ask him to take action for whatever you want 3 times. Ever since the solitary sword ancestor set up a bounty for Jianchen a few years ago, not only have many organizations on our planet begun searching for this person called Jianchen, but there have also been many organizations from the other Great Plains and Great Planets who have devoted quite a lot of effort to find him as well. They all want to be able to ask the solitary sword ancestor to take action for them 3 times. People whispered nearby as soon as Su Ran had finished speaking. Rumor has it that the solitary sword ancestor is a 5th heavenly layer Grand Prime. That's enough to become the undisputed greatest expert on our dark sky planet. Let alone our planet, the solitary sword ancestor would be invincible on the great plains that rank towards the bottom as well. People discussed constantly in the surroundings. All of them talked about the solitary sword ancestor in great interest. Let's go and find somewhere to settle down first, Su Ran said to Jianchen and left immediately. After they had left, a slender but extremely ugly woman arrived before Jianchen's wanted poster. She stared at Jianchen's appearance closely, as if she was trying to memorize it completely. Before me is an opportunity of a lifetime. Jianchen, although we have no grievances, I have to find you because only by finding you will the solitary sword ancestor owe me a favor. And through this favor, I can ask the solitary sword ancestor to take action and rescue Sister Qing Yishuan from the Gus Clan. The ugly woman clenched her hand tightly as determination flooded her eyes. She swore inside, Sister Qing Yishuan, just wait for me. I will definitely find a way to save you. Jianchen, Kaya, and Su Ran found an inn to settle down in temporarily. They paid to stay for 3 years all at once. Jianchen directly went to his room after that, and set up formations to enter seclusion. Jianchen sat in the room as several space rings appeared in his hand. He began to tidy through the cultivation resources quietly to prepare for the breakthrough. Jianchen had accumulated a large amount of cultivation resources from his trip to the Neptunian Divine Palace. Even though he had given many of them to his sister, he still had plenty on him right now. For the sake of convenience, Jianchen sorted through all the resources before storing all of them into one space ring. After doing all that, he took out the 2 god-tier heavenly resources that he was unable to tell the grades of from his space ring first, and wolfed them down. The 2 heavenly resources were of extremely high grades. They came from the space ring of a Grand Prime. There had been a total of 5 of them. He gave 3 to Shui Yunlan, so that she could give them to his sister. As soon as the heavenly resources reached his stomach, it turned into tremendous energy that flooded Jianchen's body completely. It was ferocious and brutal, forcefully making Jianchen's body swell. If it were some other god king, they probably would have directly exploded to pieces if they were in Jianchen's shoes because the energy in the 2 heavenly resources was just too vast. However, Jianchen's chaotic body was about to break through to major achievement now, so it was extremely tough. As a result, the energy that filled his body posed no harm to him. Jianchen's dantian seemed to have turned into a vortex, devouring the energy that had filled his body with no signs of stopping. As he practiced his cultivation method, the energy was compressed and refined into strands of pure chaotic force that were stowed away in his chaotic Niden. It just had to be mentioned that as Jianchen made progress with chaotic force and broke through layer after layer, his rate of refinement and absorption reached a completely new level as well. Before too long, Jianchen had refined the 2 god-tier heavenly resources completely. The terrifying energy within the 2 heavenly resources are only enough to cover a 5th of what I require to reach the 13th layer. It looks like the amount of energy I need to break through completely surpasses my estimates. Jianchen gradually opened his eyes after refining the 2 heavenly resources. After a moment of thought, he took out over several dozen heavenly resources that he had obtained from the divine medicinal garden, as well as mountainous piles of high-grade and supreme-grade divine crystals. He continued to cultivate. Among the 49 great plains of the Saints' world, one was known as the Lone Heaven Plain. The Lone Heaven Plain was also divided into the eastern, western, southern, northern, and central plains. These 5 regions also had many divine kingdoms and empires. The Lone Heaven Plain even had 3 everlasting empires. However, the most awe-inspiring ones were not the 3 everlasting empires or the peak clans that stood at the peak of the plain. Instead, it was the 5 renowned heavenly kings who held absolute authority. The 5 heavenly kings each resided in one region. Their existence made them supreme on the Lone Heaven Plain. Even the 3 everlasting empires and the various peak organizations had to lower themselves out of respect before the 5 heavenly kings. The Azurpung king of the Azurpung lineage was one of the 5 heavenly kings. He was located in the central region, and took an azure mountain shrouded in clouds as his territory. He had named it Azure Brilliance Mountain. In the Saints' world he was the infamous Azure Pung King, but on the lone heaven plane, he was the great heavenly king of Azure Brilliance. At this moment, on this exact mountain, a disheveled man in a depressing state knelt on the ground as he pressed his head firmly against the ground. "Master, I've come for punishment," the old man said politely. "Songing, I specially sent you to protect Emocheng. In the end, Emocheng's dead, but you're still alive. Do I still have any need for useless people?" The Azure Pung King's cold, dignified voice rang out from the mountain. There was chilling, killing intent within the voice. "I deserve 1,000 deaths for having failed to protect the young master. However, before I die, I have something important to report to Master. There's another side to the young master's death." Songing said politely. "Speak." Afterwards, Songing reported everything that had happened in the Neptunian Divine Palace to the Azure Pung King. He dared not lie before the Azure Pung King, because the latter could instantaneously discern whether he was telling the truth. In other words, Emocheng's death is closely related to that person called Jianchen. The Azure Pung King's cold voice rang out. "Master, although the young master died to Mingdong's hands, it was all because of Jianchen," said Songing. When the battle between several hundred supreme godkings erupted in the Neptunian Divine Palace, he and Mocheng had worked together against Mingdong. After being cut in half, Songing had become heavily injured and incapacitated. However, he did not die in the battle. Instead, he was saved by a supreme godking who was on good terms with the Azure Pung lineage on the chaotic battlefield, having been sent into a spatial storage artifact. He had only recovered slightly earlier, and after which he hurried back to the lone heaven plane. "Jianchen." The Azure Pung King's cold voice rang out from the Azure Brilliance Mountain. The Azure Pung King appeared silently on the peak of the mountain. He gazed at the empty space coldly as heavy killing intent wrapped around him. However, his face seemed sickly pale. The next moment, the Azure Pung King vanished. He had shot off from the lone heaven plane with unbelievable speed, disappearing into the depths of outer space in the blink of an eye. A meteor hovered in the vast outer space silently, without moving at all. The solitary sword ancestor sat on the meteor with his eyes closed. Killing intent revolved around him without dispersing. He had already remained there for many years, silently waiting for news of Jianchen. No matter where Jianchen had run off to, he would hurry off as quickly as he could as soon as he learnt of his whereabouts. At this moment, there was a flash of azure light. The Azure Pung King had used his extreme speed to shoot through space, arriving before the meteor that the solitary sword ancestor sat on. "The death of my disciple is related to Jianchen. There's nothing I can do about that person from the heavenly palace of Bishing right now, but I have to kill Jianchen. Solitary sword ancestor, your way of divination is at a higher level than mine. Can't you divine Jianchen's whereabouts instead of waiting here painfully?" Without any greetings, the Azure Pung King directly asked the solitary sword ancestor as soon as he arrived. The solitary sword ancestor gradually opened his eyes. He looked at the pale, still injured Azure Pung King calmly and said, "I've tried divination more than just a single time in the past few years in an attempt to find Jianchen's whereabouts. But in the end I found nothing. I don't know where he is. He's a mere god king, yet I can't find anything about him. That can only mean three things. The first is that an expert with a cultivation greater than mine is secretly protecting him, obscuring the heavenly secrets for him. The second is that he's hiding in some special place that can mask him from the heavenly secrets, which is why I can't find him. The third is that his life is extraordinary, unbound by the world or unrestrained by the laws. The first is unlikely, while the third is just a baseless rumor. It's extremely likely that he's hiding in a special place. I'd like to see how long you can keep hiding." The Azure Pung King's face sank, and he immediately took out a jade talisman. He sent a message back to the Azure Brilliance Mountain. "Immediately place a bounty on Jianchen across the entire Saints world, and investigate all of Jianchen's origins for me." With the Azure Pung King's orders, the entire Azure Brilliance Mountain began to move. They passed the Azure Pung King's orders to the three everlasting empires, and the various peak clans as quickly as they could. As soon as the various organizations learnt that the Heavenly King of Azure Brilliance had personally passed down an order, they dared not tarry. They spread the news of this bounty as quickly as possible across the entire Lone Heaven continent, very quickly before expanding out to the other great planes and planets. He was a mere God King, yet he could make 2 famed Grand Primes place a bounty on him. Not only did the bounty reach the other planes and planets in the shortest amount of time possible, but Jian Chen had even become a familiar figure between all the major and minor organizations. Even though everyone knew that it was countless times easier to find a needle in a haystack than to find someone hidden in the vast Saints world, the promises of the 2 Grand Primes was an irresistible temptation to many clans and organizations. This was because all they needed was the support from one of the 2 experts, and their organizations would rise up. As a result, even when they knew that it was hopeless, many organizations still decided to search for Jian Chen painstakingly. There were even some organizations that had begun investigating Jian Chen's identity and background. They were not the only people searching for Jian Chen. There were many peak clans searching for Jian Chen as well, where a few of them were even renowned throughout the entire Saints world. These people did not search for Jian Chen for the solitary sword ancestor, or the Azure Pung King's rewards. They only wanted to kill him. After all, Jian Chen had killed quite a few Supreme God Kings in the Neptunian Divine Palace. There were even more Supreme God Kings who had not died to his hands directly, but whose deaths were caused by him. He had caused around half of the God King's throne to empty out. Quite a few of these Supreme God Kings were the futures of these peak clans. They had been nurtured with endless resources. As a result, many people hated Jian Chen dearly in the Saints world. Still in seclusion, Jian Chen had no idea he had become a famed figure that shook up the Saints world. Currently, he was devoting all his efforts to breaking through to the 13th layer of the chaotic body. Very soon, he used up all the heavenly resources that could increase cultivation. Only recovery heavenly resources were left. Not a single high-grade or supreme-grade divine crystal remained either, having all been refined into strands of chaotic force. Now, the only resources he had left from the Neptunian Divine Palace were 1,005 colored divine crystals, and the tens of million fire divine crystals. Jian Chen was unable to resist his desire for strength now that he neared a breakthrough. As a result, he ignored the wastefulness and took out a large number of fire divine crystals without any hesitation to cultivate. His chaotic body could refine all the energy in the world. As a result, even though the fire divine crystals were filled with pure fire-attributed energy, it was not too different from the supreme-grade divine crystals. The only difference was that the energy within the fire divine crystals was 2 or 3 times purer than supreme-quality divine crystals. Time passed silently. After absorbing over 10 million fire divine crystals in who knew how long, Jian Chen's body shook loudly. The chaotic Niden in his dantian had finally shattered. Jian Chen was experienced with the process that followed. In just a few days, his chaotic force and chaotic body completely changed. The fist-sized chaotic Niden had shrunken back to the size of a soybean, but the chaotic force within it was several times more powerful than before. He had formally reached the 13th layer of the chaotic body, having reached major achievement. Even in the Immortals world, only a handful of people had a chaotic body at major achievement. I never thought that the amount of resources exhausted to reach the 13th layer would be so terrifying. Jian Chen opened his eyes. There was no longer the joy from breaking through on his face anymore. He soon frowned instead. The amount of resources he exhausted for this breakthrough had completely surpassed his expectations. However, for each layer of the chaotic body, the resources required would be several times, or even over a dozen times more than the last. He could not help but worry about the resources he needed in the future. Sigh whatever. Jian Chen exhaled gently. He dismissed his thoughts before leaving his room. Kaya and Su Rant's formations were tightly sealed, so Jian Chen did not disturb him. Instead, he left the inn alone to investigate some things outside. On the wide, bustling streets outside, Jian Chen could hear people discuss about him everywhere while his wanted posters were stuck everywhere. It caused many people to slow down and take a look. The Azure Pung King has actually placed a bounty on my head as well, Jian Chen frowned. He had already learnt about Mo Cheng's death from everyone's discussions, but Mo Cheng's death actually had nothing to do with him. He only had been in conflict with Song Ying at most. He did not understand why the Azure Pung King had placed a bounty on him. Whether it's the Azure Pung King or the solitary sword ancestor, they're both famed experts of the Saints' world. They have terrifying techniques. Although the Saints' world is vast, it shouldn't be anything difficult for them to find a puny God King. All they need to do is forecast my location. It made sense that they could not find me when I was in the concealing formation before, but I've already left it now. Just the time I spent traveling through outer space has amounted to several years. Coupled with the time I spent in seclusion, they should have been able to locate me long ago if they were really searching for me, but they've never come. Instead, they've set a bounty for me across the Saints' world, mobilizing the power of all the cultivators to find me. Seeing how they're paying such a hefty price to mobilize everyone, there's only one explanation, and that's the great abilities of the Azure Pung King, and the solitary sword ancestor cannot forecast where I am. Jianchen thought and instead felt relieved. At the same time, there was a store that especially sold heavenly resources near Jianchen. A slender woman stood at the counter. Logically speaking, the woman should have possessed impressive beauty from her figure, but her face just happened to be extremely ugly. It was covered with vicious scars that crisscross one another. "Shopkeeper, please have a look at my heavenly resource and tell me how many divine crystals I can exchange it for." The woman took out a crudely crafted wooden box from her space ring and opened it hesitantly. Immediately, an intoxicating fragrance poured out. Just a single whiff of it was enough for people to focus their minds. A violet peach lay within the crudely crafted box. This is a heavenly resource that can increase the cultivation of people by 500 years. Moreover, its effects are mellow and leave no side effects. Even if mortals ingest them, it will cause them no harm. "Shopkeeper, how much do you think it's worth?" the woman asked rather uneasily. Even though she could tell that the peach was extraordinary, its grade was just far too low. The moment the woman opened the wooden box, Jianchen, who was only a few kilometers away, immediately shuddered. He looked ahead as his eyes shone. He said in surprise, "This is the presence of Xianhuang Qi." In the next moment, Jianchen vanished. Like a bolt of lightning, he crossed the distance as quickly as he could, and arrived before the woman silently. What a peculiar presence! The shopkeeper was an old man who seemed to be in his 70s. He studied the peach closely as he showed surprise. He secretly estimated its value. Bang! At this moment, Jianchen took action with lightning speed, slamming shut the wooden box in the woman's hand to stop the presence from leaking out any further. The wooden box also ended up in Jianchen's hand. What are you doing? Are you trying to steal from me?" The woman stared at Jianchen, who had suddenly appeared beside her, in surprise and fear. She actually failed to react when Jianchen took the wooden box from her. This meant that the unfamiliar man with an ordinary appearance possessed a cultivation far greater than hers. "Dear customer, the item in your hand was brought here by this lady to be sold. You've stolen it without this lady's permission, so you've broken a rule of the imperial capital." The shopkeeper looked at Jianchen furiously as he growled. Chapter 2190. The news of an acquaintance. Jianchen did not seem to hear their words. He clenched the crude box tightly as he became extremely stern. As a matter of fact, his hand that held the wooden box even trembled gently. He had confirmed with a single glance that the violet peach in the box was a violet cloud peach he had given to someone close to him when he left the Tianyuan continent for the Saints' world. Clearly, the peach in the box was a first-grade immortal tier violet cloud peach. Even the crude box that held the peach was something he personally crafted in the past. "Senior, please return the item to me." The woman repeated herself nervously. The violet cloud peach was in Jianchen's hand, but she dared not snatch it from him. Jianchen finally returned to his senses. He suppressed his excitement and unease and looked at the woman with a piercing gaze. He said sternly, "Where did you get this from?" Why do I have to tell you, eh? And that's mine, so please return it to me." The woman immediately became uneasy under Jianchen's piercing gaze. "Sir, this is the imperial capital of the Thousand Leaf Empire. The Chui Spiritual Medicine Store belongs to the Chui family, one of the 3 great organizations of the Thousand Leaf Empire. Do you plan on resorting to violence in this store owned by the Chui family? The shopkeeper's voice gradually turned cold. He studied Jianchen with squinted eyes. Although he could not see through Jianchen's cultivation and knew that he was a powerful expert, he still felt no fear. The Chui family was one of the 3 peak clans of the Thousand Leaf Empire. They were an existence that could stand at an equal level with the imperial family. With the support of the Chui family, no one was bold enough to cause problems in the store within the Thousand Leaf Empire. Afterwards, the shopkeeper looked at the woman. An undetectable disgust flashed through the depths of his eyes. He said firmly, "Lady, take back what belongs to you. The rules of the imperial capital are enforced here. In the imperial capital, there can only be fair trading. Actions such as forcing people or stealing are forbidden. Otherwise, it would be challenging the Thousand Leaf Empire and looking down on the empire." The shopkeeper directed his words at the end to Jianchen. Jianchen ignored the shopkeeper's words. His gaze towards the woman became sharper and sharper as a powerful pressure radiated from his body. He said coldly, "Did you steal this? Tell me, where did you steal it from?" The woman was only a god, so she immediately paled under Jianchen's pressure. Fear filled her eyes as she said in a trembling voice, "And no, my younger sister gave this to me. My sister didn't steal it from anyone either. She said she brought it up with her from a lower world." Jianchen's face immediately loosened when he heard that. Afterwards, his gaze towards the woman became slightly gentler. He glanced at the furious shopkeeper and frowned slightly. He said to the woman, "If you're telling the truth, then I have close ties with your sister. It's not convenient to talk here, so let's go somewhere else." Jianchen returned the box with the peach to the woman and made his way out. The Thousand Leaf Empire was only an ancient empire, so he was not afraid that someone would steal the violet cloud peach from the woman under his watch. She's her sister? There are only so many females on the Tianyuan continent who could reach the origin realm. I wonder who has come to the Saint's world, Jianchen thought. He was eager to know who this acquaintance was. "Hold on. Lady, here are 100 high-grade divine crystals. Please take it, and the heavenly resource in your hand will belong to our store from now on." The shopkeeper suddenly appeared beside the woman, and directly shoved a small cloth bag with 100 high-grade divine crystals into the woman's hand before quickly extending his hand towards the wooden box. He had dealt in various heavenly resources for many years now, so he had already developed great insight. Even though he did not recognize the violet cloud peach, he determined that this heavenly resource that was not of a particularly high grade was far more complicated than it seemed from its wondrous presence alone. However, just when the shopkeeper stuck out his hand, another hand grabbed it tightly all of a sudden. Jianchen, who had already left the store, suddenly appeared again, stopping the shopkeeper. "You want to buy this heavenly resource with a measly 100 high-grade divine crystals? You've sure done your calculations well. We're not selling," Jianchen sneered. The violet cloud peach contained Xianhuang qi. This was something significant that could not be exposed in the Saint's world. The shopkeeper was furious. Just when he was about to call out, he forcefully swallowed his words when he saw Jianchen's glare. He dared not say anything. This was because he felt chills from the glare, striking fear in his heart. "Let's go." Jianchen did not stick around. He left the store after calling to the woman. The woman hesitated before leaving with Jianchen in the end. Very soon, Jianchen brought the woman to a remote region of the city. He looked at the woman deeply and said, "What's the name of the person who gave you this?" The woman looked at Jianchen and hesitated. She was uncertain about the relationship between the person before her and her sister. If he was her enemy, she would be dooming her sister. However, as soon as she thought about the situation her sister currently faced, she immediately made up my mind. "My sister's name is Qing Yishuan. Do you really know her?" "Qing Yishuan. It's actually her." Jianchen was taken aback. He had never thought that the first acquaintance he would encounter from his homeland in the Saint's world would be Qing Yishuan. "I never thought that Qing Yishuan would have come to the Saint's world as well, but it makes sense now that I think about it." Qing Yishuan's talent was never poor. Under the poor environment of the Tianyuan continent, she was still able to cultivate until Saint King. Now that origin energy is gradually recovering on the Tianyuan continent, and the world there is connected to the Saint's world, the cultivation environment has improved dramatically. With Qing Yishuan's talent, reaching the origin realm is nothing difficult. Jianchen smiled faintly. He was delighted. It truly was something worthy of celebration to be able to reunite with an acquaintance in a foreign land. Seeing Jianchen's expression, the woman finally confirmed that not only did the person before her know her sister, but they were not enemies either. She was relieved. Where's Qing Yishuan right now? Jianchen asked. My sister's situation is quite negative. She has been captured by the people of the Gus Clan, so she's in constant danger. See, can you save my sister? The woman stared at Jianchen closely as hope filled her face. However, she sighed in disappointment again as she seemed depressed. The Gus Clan was one of the 3 peak organizations of the Thousand Leaf Empire. They possessed a primordial realm expert, and stood on the same level as the imperial family. As someone who had come up from a lower world recently, even if Qing Yishuan knew people in the Saint's world, it was impossible for them to be very powerful with her level of cultivation. What did you say? Qing Yishuan has been captured? Jianchen's smile disappeared, and his face immediately sank. Chapter 2191. The Gus Clan. Who has Qing Yishuan offended? Why have the people of the Gus Clan captured her? And how do you know Qing Yishuan? Jianchen asked gravely. My sister is only at the origin realm. She never dared to offend anyone after coming to the Saint's world. Even when she encountered deities, she would take a detour. She got captured by the people of the Gus Clan because her beauty and bearing caught their eyes. As for how we know each other, we need to go back several decades. Back then, I was heavily injured and at death's door. It was Sister Qing Yishuan who used a heavenly resource to save me, so she became my savior. After a period of contact, I found that Sister Qing Yishuan and I got along very well, so I began calling her younger sister, said the woman before sighing gently. Sorrow and self-blame filled her face. It's all because of me. I shouldn't have brought sister here. I always knew that the first young master of the Gus Clan was a lustful man. Rumor has it that he has defiled countless women. It's all my fault. I doomed sister. Regret filled the woman's face. How long ago was Qing Yishuan captured? Jianchen asked after paling out of anger. Qing Yishuan was an acquaintance from his homeland, and they had formed ties in the past. He could not allow Qing Yishuan to suffer from any accidents in the Saint's world. My sister was captured 5 years ago. What? It has been 5 years already? Jianchen's face changed. 5 years of cultivation could pass in the blink of an eye, but many things could happen with the situation Qing Yishuan faced by now. The woman seemed to know what Jianchen was worrying about. She explained, the people who captured Qing Yishuan are the first young master's personal guards. These personal guards specially serve the first young master. They often take women of low strength, impressive bearings, and no backgrounds from various places to offer up to their master. However, there is a rumor recently that the first young master has been in seclusion for over a decade now, and is about to become an overgod. As a result, Sister Qing Yishuan should still be very safe right now. Jianchen finally became relieved when he heard that. As long as Qing Yishuan was fine, he would be able to come up with a method to save her. Sigh, if only I could find Jianchen. It's a pity that the Saint's world is so vast. Who knows where Jianchen is hiding? Finding him is almost impossible. The woman sighed gently. Clearly, she was at her wits' end about Qing Yishuan's situation. After all, she was only a mid-god. Why are you looking for Jianchen? Jianchen stared at the woman strangely. He had already disguised himself, and had covered up his original appearance. He did not have to worry about being recognized unless their cultivation completely exceeded his. The woman glanced at Jianchen like he was an idiot and said unhappily, naturally, I'm looking for Jianchen so that I can get the solitary sword ancestor's help. Who do you think the solitary sword ancestor is? I've never heard of him in the past, but rumors about him have formed quite the hubbub. It's said that he's a grand prime, and I heard that even our planet lord can't afford to offend him. If he helps out, the Gus clan would never disobey even if they have endless courage. Jianchen glanced at the woman deeply and said in thought, "Tell me the location of the Gus clan. I'll come up with a way to save Qing Yishuan." At this moment, a length yell suddenly rang out in the distance. It continued for quite a long time, basically spreading across the entire imperial capital and alarming countless people. It's the first young master of the Gus clan. He has actually broken through to Overgod successfully. The first young master of the Gus clan really does have extraordinary talent. It has only been around 50,000 years since he began cultivating, and he's already become an Overgod. While reaching Overgod in 50,000 years cannot be compared to those supreme prodigies who have managed to shake up the Saints' world, it's still quite the talent in the Thousand Leaf Empire. Afterwards, discussions rang out everywhere in the imperial capital. Many people praised the first young master of the Gus clan constantly when he was mentioned. Oh no, we're in trouble now. The first young master has broken through so quickly. Sister is in danger. What should we do? The woman began to panic as unease and anxiety filled her heart. Don't worry. Jianchen looked in the direction of the yell. He had already confirmed the location of the Gus clan. Then he returned to the inn he stayed at as quickly as he could. Before long, Jianchen emerged from the inn with a fan and a set of luxurious white robes. A cold, black-clothed man followed him closely. A powerful presence seemed to radiate from the man. "Hey, do you remember what I said? Do you know what you should do?" Jianchen walked at the front with his fan as he said to the black-clothed man secretly. "Yes, young master. I know what to do," Heya said with some respect. "Sigh. It's a pity that I'm wanted everywhere, and even all the sword techniques, methods of battle, laws comprehended, and treasures used have been clearly recorded. I can't fight at all. Otherwise, it would never be so troublesome." Jianchen fanned the fan and strode ahead like a young master, but he felt helpless inside. Before long, he arrived near the Gus clan with Heya. By now, the main entrance of the Gus clan was already filled with people who had come bearing rich gifts to congratulate the young master about his breakthrough. The Gus clan was one of the three peak clans of the Thousand Leaf Empire. They stood on the same level as the imperial family, so they were extremely powerful. Even among the neighboring ancient empires, there were basically no organizations that dared to not respect the Gus clan. There were even more people that wanted to suck up to them. Even though a lot of people had gathered outside the main entrance, there was no disorder or noise. All the people who had come to congratulate the young master stood in lines obediently as they stepped through the main entrance with smiles. The whole process was neat. There were even some people who passed some precious items to the guards at the main entrance to bribe them as they stepped through the entrance. Despite only being guards, they benefited quite a lot. This was the status and power that a clan with a primordial realm expert could possess. But at this moment, there just happened to be two people who did not follow the rules. Not only did they avoid lining up like everyone else, but they even cut ahead instead and made their way towards the entrance haughtily. "Hold on, the two of you. State your identities and intentions." The two of them were naturally stopped by guards. An overgod who seemed to be the leader called out emotionlessly, "How dare you? Who do you think you are by speaking to our young master like this? Why don't you kneel and beg for forgiveness?" The black-clothed man who followed behind the young man immediately snorted coldly. A powerful presence radiated from him, crushing down on the overgod mercilessly. The guard immediately paled, and he was actually unable to withstand the pressure. With a plop, his legs gave way, and his knees struck the ground heavily. His knees had been shattered from the impact. Peak Godking. This person is actually a Peak Godking. Which powerful organization does this young man come from, seeing how he has a Peak Godking as a bodyguard? Even across the entire Thousand Leaf Empire, Peak Godkings are unique experts. Their statuses are extremely great, yet a Peak Godking is only behaving as a bodyguard right now. All of the people who had gathered to congratulate the clan were stunned. They stared at the black-clothed man in shock as their hearts fell into turmoil. Obviously, the two of them were Jianchen in disguise and Heya. Chapter 2192. What haughtiness! The entrance of the Gus clan fell silent at that moment. Everyone stared at the disguised Jianchen and Heya as they all held their breaths. They could not provoke this person since he had a peak Godking as a bodyguard. Jianchen swung his fan gently. He arrogantly looked at the overgod who had his knees shattered while kneeling before him. Jianchen raised his hand slightly to signal for Heya to release his presence before saying uncaringly, "Is this how your Gus clan receives guests? Ha ha ha, I didn't realize we'd be having esteemed guests, so please forgive me for failing to welcome you from afar." At this moment, an old voice rang out with a peal of generous laughter. A white-robed old man strode over from inside. He had a healthy glow to his face. He clasped his fist towards Jianchen from afar in a modest manner. He seemed extremely polite. There were over a dozen high-ranking members of the clan of varying ages behind the old man. They hurried over as their gazes were all locked onto Jianchen. Jianchen glanced across them indifferently and saw through their strengths completely. The old man at the front was a late Godking while the people behind him were all Godkings as well. Most of them were early Godkings with only 3 mid-Godkings. Including the old man who stood at the very front, there were only 2 late Godkings in total. "I am Gu Yuan, the current patriarch of the Gus clan. I'd like to welcome this young master on behalf of the entire Gus clan." Gu Yuan laughed. He glanced at Heya, who stood beside Jianchen, and his eyes narrowed by an undetectable amount. Then he began to treat Jianchen with even more caution. He yelled at the overgod guard, "Nati, how can you be so rude? Why don't you apologize to the young master?" At this moment, the guard called Nati completely understood that the person before him was not someone he could offend, let alone him, but even the patriarch of the Gus clan probably could not afford to offend him. As such, without any hesitation, he lowered his head and begged Jianchen for forgiveness, as if he was filled with regret. Jianchen did not even glance at Nati. He swung his fan gently as he studied the design of the Gus clan. In an arrogant and condescending manner he said indifferently, "This young master is not a petty person, so rise. I'll forget about your rudeness earlier, but there definitely won't be a second time." As if his life had just been spared, Nati thanked him frantically. Nati had already begun to fear Jianchen, seeing how he had a peak Godking as a bodyguard. Just how great of a background did he possess to have a peak Godking as a personal bodyguard? At the very least, the Gus clan treated all of their Godkings like treasures, including early Godkings. Their statuses were supreme, and they would never be treated as guards. Ha ha ha. It is my Gus clan's honor to have the young master visit. Please do come in, young master. The patriarch of the Gus clan called out to Jianchen warmly. He spoke very carefully, as he was afraid that he would offend the young master somehow. In the main hall of the Gus clan, Gu Yuan asked all the previous guests to leave. All the upper echelon of the clan gathered in there to welcome Jianchen with their greatest courtesy. Jianchen sat on a seat very casually within the hall. He behaved naturally and did not act reserved at all. Heya, on the other hand, stood behind Jianchen emotionlessly like a loyal bodyguard. His heavy presence as a peak Godking revolved around him vaguely, causing great pressure to the early and mid Godkings in the hall. All their expressions became unnaturally forced. Gu Yuan introduced all the important members of the Gus clan to Jianchen before clasping his hands at Jianchen. "May I ask how I can refer to this young master?" "I'm Changyang." "So it's young master Changyang. Young master, do you happen to come from the central region of planet Tianming?" Gu Yuan clasped his hands with a smile as he thought about the organizations on planet Tianming that had names related to Changyang's. Jianchen purposefully acted in an arrogant manner. He gently sipped the tea that was made from precious heavenly resources and said, "I'm not from planet Tianming. I came out with a senior from my clan this time. When we passed by planet Tianming, we made a temporary stop here because my senior wanted to visit an acquaintance. I've always liked freedom, and I like to see the various traditions and customs of different places, so I didn't come out with my senior this time, strolling through planet Tianming by myself. Young Master Changyang is dignified and of a striking appearance. I can tell with a single glance that the young master is extraordinary. It would go without saying that young Master Changyang's senior must be a peak expert, who is a natural at cultivation." Gu Yuan said casually to probe Jianchen's background indirectly. Jianchen acted like he had no idea. He said seriously, My senior only managed to break through to chaotic prime a few million years ago. That's nothing impressive in my clan, so how can he be considered as a natural at cultivation? Gu Yuan's hand trembled violently when he heard that, and the teacup he had just lifted up almost fell to the ground. Shock filled his eyes. The other god kings in the hall all became shocked as well. All of their gazes towards Jianchen became filled with respect and angst. Let's go, Patriarch Gu Yuan. Let's go for a stroll outside. Show me the scenery here. Jianchen suddenly stood up and directly made his way out. As if the world revolved around him, he did not care whether it was to the convenience of the owner of this place. However, when Gu Yuan and everyone else saw Jianchen's behavior, they only found it to suit him. How the young master of a peak organization like Jianchen had suddenly become interested in their puny Gus clan was clearly no longer something they could consider. They had been completely stunned by the chaotic prime senior that Jianchen had mentioned. All they thought about was how to treat this young master well and establish a positive relationship with him. Young Master Changyang, this way please. Gu Yuan and the others immediately led the way for Jianchen. They behaved even more submissively, attempting to curry up to him along the way. With their company, Jianchen strolled through the Gus clan. He seemed like he was just admiring the scenery there, but he was secretly anxious. After all, the Gus clan was an ancient clan with primordial realm experts. Therefore, formations and barriers were everywhere here, preventing him from finding anything with the senses of his soul. As a result, he had no idea where Qing Yishuan was imprisoned. He did not even know whether Qing Yishuan was actually imprisoned in the Gus clan. Unfortunately, he could not ask about this matter directly. After all, he was playing the role of young master of a great organization right now. As soon as he asked about a receival cultivator on his own whim, many holes would appear, and it would lead to many unexplainable questions. Young Master Changyang, this is where the servants and guards stay. I think there's no reason for us to go there, just in case we end up dirtying the young master's feet. Gu Yuan said carefully just when they were about to pass through a barrier. His expression was rather unnatural. This was because this region had been specially allocated to their first young master. The first young master of the Gus clan was a lecherous fellow, so some shameful acts would happen in there frequently. Naturally, this was a trivial matter in Gu Yuan's eyes, but if young Master Changyang, who possessed a frighteningly great status, saw this, it would leave a negative impression. However, Jianchen ignored him. He strolled ahead and directly passed through the barrier with an arrogant expression while waving his fan. Gu Yuan dared not stop him. He could only sigh secretly, praying that nothing unsightly was happening inside. Afterwards, he followed Jianchen and reluctantly. Let go of me. If you touch me again, I'll self-destruct. A furious woman's voice rang out from afar as soon as he had passed through the barrier. Jianchen's face sank and killing intent flashed through his eyes when he heard the familiar voice. It belonged to Qing Yishuan. The patriarch of the Gus clan, Gu Yuan, cursed inside when he heard this voice. He felt his head begin to ache. Although he had no idea who the woman was, he understood his son's behavior. Even without thinking, he knew that the woman would be related to his son. If it were some other time, he would not be bothered to care about a trivial matter like this, but at a time like this, it would definitely give young Master Changyang a bad impression. Naturally, Gu Yuan did not want to see this happen. After all, he wanted to use this opportunity to befriend this young Master Changyang. Young Master, it's probably some argument due to some conflict between servants. With your esteemed status, the place where servants reside do not suit you. Let's go elsewhere and have a look, Gu Yuan said from the side. However, just when Gu Yuan finished talking, a lecherous voice rang out. Ha ha! Self-destruct? With your mere cultivation at returnance, you want to self-destruct before me? Aren't you underestimating me a little too much? Tsk, this woman really is impressive. Not only does she possess otherworldly beauty, but more importantly, she possesses a bearing that only experts have. I heard you came up from a lower world, so that means you were once the sovereign of the lower world, an existence that controlled the fate of countless people. Hehehe, I love women like this the most. Dominating these past sovereigns of lower worlds must lead to great pleasure. Gu Yuan's face became ugly when he heard this voice. Jianchen closed the fan in his hand with a clap and made his way towards the hall, moving towards the direction of the voice. When he approached the door, Heya rushed to the door and opened it directly. Jianchen strode in. As soon as he entered the building, he saw a woman of otherworldly beauty standing there pale with anger as she glared ahead. There was no fear on her face at all. Only bone-deep hatred and intense killing intent existed. Jianchen's gaze locked onto the woman. She wore the same, azure clothes and had the same familiar face. She was the Qing Yishuan that he had met in the Sea Realm. Seeing how Qing Yishuan was still unharmed, Jianchen finally became relieved. "Who are you? Who let you in?" At this moment a man's shout rang out. A rather handsome young man stood near Qing Yishuan. His nefarious smile vanished as Jianchen suddenly barged him. His face sank as he glared at Jianchen. "Do not be rude." Gu Yuan walked in with an ugly expression as he glared at the young man. "Father, why have you come?" The young man immediately became surprised by Gu Yuan's arrival. He knew that his father never came to this place. "This is young Master Changyang. Why don't you greet him?" Gu Yuan growled at the young man before telling Jianchen politely, "Young Master Changyang, this is my embarrassment of a son, Gu Feng." Gu Feng was not dim. He could tell from how his father behaved that this young Master Changyang probably had great origins. Immediately, he suppressed his unhappiness and glanced at Jianchen in surprise and doubt as he immediately clasped his hands in greeting. "Strange. Where I stay is a rather remote part of the clan. Why has this young Master Changyang that even father treats so politely come to a place like this?" Gu Feng felt very confused. What a special woman." Jianchen ignored Gu Feng. He looked at Qing Yishuan, and his eyes immediately lit up. He waved his fan as he walked around Qing Yishuan, studying her with great interest. He praised, "A stubborn personality where she'd rather die than to give in. Most importantly, I can actually see a unique bearing from her that only peak experts possess. Yep, this woman has the right to become my personal servant and serve me." Gu Feng's face immediately changed. Just when he was about to say something, Gu Yuan's chuckle rang out. "It's her blessing to be able to catch young Master Changyang's eye. Since young Master Changyang has taken a liking to her, I'll make the decision to gift this beautiful woman to the young master." "Father." Gu Feng began to talk. His face was ugly and filled with reluctance. However, after Gu Yuan glared at him, he forced his mouth shut. At this moment, Qing Yishuan suddenly looked at Jianchen. She said coldly, "I can follow you if you only want me as your servant. However, you need to guarantee that you will not defile me in any way." Due to Jianchen's disguise and concealed presence, Qing Yishuan failed to recognize him. Jianchen smiled impudently as he used his fan to prop up Qing Yishuan's chin slightly. He smiled gently. "This is the saint's world, not the lower world where you once reigned supreme. You're a puny origin realm cultivator, so what right do you have to discuss conditions with me?" Qing Yishuan's face darkened when she heard that, but she still said stubbornly, "If you don't agree, I'd rather die than follow you." "You'd rather die?" As if Jianchen had heard the funniest joke in the world, he chuckled. "Before me, even dying is difficult for a puny origin realm cultivator like you. You have no choice at all." At this moment, Heya took a step over and directly extended a finger towards Qing Yishuan's back, controlling her easily. Afterwards, he returned behind Jianchen with Qing Yishuan and strode out. The patriarch of the Gus clan dared not object. Instead, he stood to one side with his head down smiling. He was afraid of showing signs of coldness. Now that the goal of the trip was fulfilled, Jianchen was unwilling to remain for much longer. Before long, he bid farewell to Gu Yuan and left the Gus clan with Qing Yishuan. "Father, don't you think this young Master Changyang seems rather strange? From what you said, I feel like this young Master Changyang came especially for that woman." The young master of the Gus clan, Gu Feng, said in doubt after Jianchen departed. "That's right. Patriarch, I also feel the same," a Godking of the Gus clan added. The patriarch looked in the direction where Jianchen had traveled off to. After a moment of thought, he said, "It is a little strange, but there are two things we can be certain about at the very least. First, this young master Chongyang is not simple. I secretly used a secret technique, but I was unable to see his exact strength. Just that means he's no ordinary person. Secondly, the bodyguard with him is truly a peak Godking. His cultivation is even slightly greater than mine and the Grand Elders. Yet an expert like that still had to show respect towards the young master. And this respect came from the bottom of his heart. He truly treated himself as a subordinate. He wasn't faking it at all. What does that mean? Perhaps the young master became rather eager to enjoy himself after seeing the woman with the extraordinary bearing, which was why he left in a hurry, an early Godking sniggered. At the same time, a deep voice rang out underground outside a formation-clad secret room within the Bloodbattle clan. This was a clan that stood equal to the Gus Clan as one of the 3 great organizations of the Thousand Leaf Empire. Ancestor, I've just received news that a potential young master of a peak clan has suddenly appeared in the imperial capital, and he paid a visit to the Gus clan. What's this got to do with our Bloodbattle clan? The ancestor's cold voice rang out from the secret room. Ancestor, our Bloodbattle clan matches the Gus clan in strength. It's basically impossible for us to destroy the Gus clan alone. However, I think an opportunity has presented itself now. You're saying to rope in that young master with a tremendous background? The ancestor said. Roping him in might not be effective. There's a more direct method right now, which is to kill the young master, and then blame the Gus clan. However, there's a peak Godking beside the young master, so for the sake of safety, the ancestor has to take action personally. Chapter 2194. The Bloodbattle clan. Shifting the blame onto the Gus clan won't be easy. How confident are you in succeeding? The ancestor of the Bloodbattle clan asked from the secret room. Although their Bloodbattle clan was the same as the Gus clan, one of the 3 great organizations of the Thousand Leaf Empire, the 3 organizations did not get along well. They fought constantly. In particular, the Bloodbattle clan and Gus clan had developed irreconcilable grievances many years ago. However, the 2 clans were equal in strength, so they were unable to destroy the other. As a result, neither the Bloodbattle clan or the Gus clan dared to wage a full-blown war, as they were afraid that they would be taken advantage of once they suffered losses. However, once they found a chance to destroy the other side, they would never just let it slip. That young master has already left the Gus clan. It's a very good opportunity. Our Bloodbattle clan has been setting up secret arrangements for many years now. As long as we use them well, I have over 90% confidence that the Gus clan will bear the blame, said the person outside the secret room. He was filled with confidence as if victory was already in his grasp. Rumble. With a heavy sound, the door to the secret room slowly opened. A chilling killing intent radiated out from the room in an overwhelming manner, causing the temperature in the surroundings to plummet. A determined, middle-aged man walked out slowly with hair that reached his waist. He wore a set of red robes, which seemed like they had been dyed with blood. He gave off a bloody smell. The heavy presence from him had completely exceeded the level of Godkings, having reached a higher level, the Primordial realm. I left everything important in the clan up to you, and you really haven't disappointed me. Go complete the arrangements. Remember, you can't let any trace of this slip out. You need to ensure that no accidents will happen. We can't doom the clan. I'll personally deal with the young master, the ancestor said sternly. Yes, ancestor. I'll go organize everything right now. The person left. The ancestor of the Bloodbattle clan stood outside the entrance of the secret room. His gaze was piercing as he murmured, There's a very large risk to this, but for the sake of the Gus clan's destruction, we need to risk it. Jianchun waved his fan as he strolled through the imperial capital of the Thousand Leaf Empire leisurely. Qing Yishuan and Heya followed him closely. Heya followed Jianchun naturally, truly treating himself as a bodyguard, a servant. After all, he had already submitted himself to Jianchun back in the Neptunian Divine Palace. As for Qing Yishuan, she followed behind Jianchun reluctantly. She felt humiliated and was gritting teeth. She gradually felt despair. Although she had left the Gus clan and escaped from the first young master, ending up with this young master Chongyang seemed no different to ending up with the first young master of the Gus clan. This young master that even the Gus clan feared also eyed her beauty. He was no different to the first young master of the Gus clan. At this moment, Jianchen suddenly looked back at Qing Yishuan. He said, "You were captured by the people of the Gus clan. If it were not for my arrival in time, you probably would have been defiled by Gu Feng. Do you want revenge? Do you want to kill Gu Feng personally as well as the guards who took you away?" Qing Yishuan stared at Jianchen coldly when she heard that. She said frigidly, "If my body is what you want for that, I don't need your assistance." You're quite stubborn." Jianchen smiled indifferently. "This is the saint's world. It's no longer the low-level world you came from. Here, you need to adapt to the laws of survival and re-evaluate your identity, or you'll struggle to survive." Qing Yishuan listened silently from behind. She gritted her teeth and said nothing. Suddenly, Qing Yishuan's body froze up. She came to a halt and remained where she was, staring ahead with a fixed gaze. A wanted poster for Jianchen was stuck there in an eye-catching manner. Many people stopped around the poster as they discussed while pointing at Jianchen's image. "It's actually Jianchen." Qing Yishuan's heart was in turmoil when she saw the familiar face and name. The saint's world was so vast, so she had never thought she would hear about Jianchen so soon. Even though it was a wanted poster, it allowed Qing Yishuan to know that Jianchen was still alive at the very least. Not only was he alive, but he had even created so much trouble as well. "I never thought he would have already become a God King, and even Supreme God Kings have died to his hands." Qing Yishuan's feelings became extremely mixed when she saw Jianchen's accomplishments that were enough to make her envy. She seemed to see the kid who could crumble from a single attack from her steal the Octotera map fragment again. Back then, Jianchen's strength did not catch her attention at all. He was extremely puny. Yet now he had become a mighty God King in her eyes, while she was only at the origin realm. Qing Yishuan looked at Jianchen's wanted poster silently before sighing secretly. She began to walk away gloomily. "Jianchen, I want to help you, but I can't even protect myself right now, so I can only wish you the best. I hope you survive," Qing Yishuan thought. "We won't be staying on planet Tianming for long. Is there any unsettled business you have here?" At this moment, Jianchen's voice rang out. Qing Yishuan hesitated after hearing that. She bit her lip gently and said seriously, "I still have a sister that I met here recently. I want to bid farewell to her." "Then go. Go with her. Make sure she's safe. At the same time, give some of your divine crystals to her sister," Jianchen said to Heya. Naturally, he knew who Qing Yishuan was talking about. It was the scarred woman. "Yes, young master," Heya replied, before leaving with Qing Yishuan. With their departure, Jianchen immediately stopped behaving impudently. He gradually became stern. He glanced at the sky, and a cold light flickered through his eyes. Immediately he flew out of the city. He had already sensed long ago that not only was he being followed, but there also seemed to be a pair of invisible eyes that would lock onto him from time to time. Whenever the eyes stared at him, Jianchen would feel threatened. However, basically no God Kings possessed the power to threaten him any longer. Only Primordial Realm experts who had surpassed God King could do so now. Chapter 2195. Fighting the Primordial Realm. Although I don't know who's following me secretly, but since I can sense them, it means that the Primordial Realm expert isn't particularly powerful. Otherwise, I wouldn't be able to sense them, thought Jianchen. After reaching the 13th layer, his strength was not the only thing that had increased. His abilities in various aspects had increased by quite a lot as well. Otherwise, he never would have been able to sense a Primordial Realm expert observing him secretly. The 12th layer of the chaotic body gave me battle prowess greater than most supreme God Kings on the God King's throne. Now that my chaotic body has broken through again, I wonder what level my battle prowess has reached now. Will I be able to stand firmly as the first place on the God King's throne? It's said that the top 10 experts of the God King's throne can hold their ground against Primordial Realm experts or even kill them. I wonder if I can kill Primordial Realm experts now. I need a Primordial Realm expert urgently to try it out and test my current strength. Let's use the Primordial Realm expert spying on me then. Although there's a risk of exposure by doing this, I don't plan on staying on planet Tianming for much longer. Jianchen left the imperial capital of the Thousand-Leaf Empire. He maintained a facade as he flew off into the distance at a steady speed. However, his speed was still extremely shocking. Before long, he had traveled 1,000,000 kilometers from the imperial capital. However, the primordial realm expert tailing him still did not show himself. However, Jianchen could clearly sense that the primordial realm expert had always been following him. It was just that he hid himself very well. As such, given Jianchen's current strength, he was unable to find him. To avoid alarming the person, Jianchen did not show any irregular behavior along the way. He even dared not use the senses of his soul. Has the person stalking me realized who I am? Or is it because of some other reason? Questions weighed on Jianchen's mind. This was extremely important, as it had a direct correlation to his safety and future. He needed to understand the reason. When Jianchen traveled 2,000,000 kilometers away from the imperial capital, the space where he stood suddenly distorted violently. The landscape around him vanished, and it was replaced by a barren world. Jianchen came to a halt. He studied the barren world and became stern. He could tell with a single glance that this was a miniature world independent from the saint's world. He had been sucked into this world unknowingly. He was not unfamiliar with miniature worlds, as there were many on the Tianyuan continent. The 10 protector clans all resided in miniature worlds opened up by saint emperors. However, miniature worlds also varied in strength. In weaker worlds, the battles between sainthood experts would be enough to cause its collapse. Clearly, the miniature world he had entered now was not low in strength. The space was extremely sturdy, enough to endure the battle shockwaves of infinite primes. At this moment, a powerful pulse of energy appeared, causing the space in the miniature world to ripple like water. Ocean-like energy surged high up in the air and instantly condensed into a huge, thick finger. With the power of slaughter, it suddenly fell towards Jianchen. The finger was extremely powerful. It was truly devastating. As the finger fell, all the space in the miniature world warped and became blurry. Jianchen's heart sank. The infinite prime he encountered this time was not a regular primordial realm expert. Instead, he comprehended one of the most offensive laws, the laws of slaughter. He would be a far more difficult opponent compared to most other experts at the same cultivation level. Moreover, his opponent struck out extremely decisively. He said nothing and unleashed his full strength right from the start with heavy killing intent. Clearly, he wanted to kill Jianchen cleanly. Jianchen bellowed out at the sky, and he immediately fought back. His presence rapidly skyrocketed as the power of the laws of the sword condensed around him, turning into a huge strand of sword chi that collided with the finger loudly. Jianchen did not use his full strength in the attack. In reality, he did not even use half of his strength. He only unleashed the might of a Godking who ranked within the top 100 of the Godking's throne. Boom! With a heavy rumble, Jianchen was blown out of the sky like a broken kite. He struck the ground heavily. His face paled as blood oozed from his lips. He seemed like he was heavily injured, lying on the ground and struggling to climb to his feet. Who are you? Why have you suddenly attacked me? Jianchen bellowed out furiously as he stared at the sky. Who I am is not important. What is important is that you won't be leaving here alive today. Young Master Chongyang. A cold voice rang out from the sky. A gleam of light flashed through Jianchen's eyes. The way this person had referred to him allowed Jianchen to understand that his identity has not been exposed, which was relieving. However, his expression did not change at all. He called out, "Since you know my name, you must know my background as well. Are you really that confident in killing me? But what confuses me is that I have no enemies on planet Tianming, so why are you trying to kill me? Since you want to know, I'll let you die knowing. My miniature world is no regular miniature world. No matter how many secret techniques for escape you have, they'll be useless here. Even if you have outstanding treasures for escape, you won't have the opportunity to use them before me. As a result, you're done for today. The reason why I want to kill you is to shift the blame to the Gus Clan. As long as you die, we can shift the blame almost flawlessly with our secret arrangement, so the Gus Clan will be destroyed. I know your background is impressive, and that you have even more powerful peak experts behind you. These peak experts are able to peer into the heavenly secrets. However, you better give up on that thought. Since I'm bold enough to move against you, I have complete confidence in removing all traces, where even the peak experts won't be able to find anything. You know everything you should know now. Young Master Changyang, it's time to send you off. With that, the overwhelming energy gathered once again. Strands of power of slaughter filled the surroundings, forming a huge blade completely condensed out of origin energy and the power of laws. It whistled towards Jian Chen's head. The person clearly did not want to waste any more time. He was afraid that accidents would happen if he did. Jian Chen's fake panic vanished as he watched the blade approach him rapidly with the might of the primordial realm. He became calm and composed while his eyes were icy. His piercing gaze was like a sword. In the next moment, a sharp and powerful sword qi radiated from Jian Chen. It shone brightly and was as dazzling as the sun. At that moment, he seemed to have become a completely different person. His presence surged towards the clouds as his battle intent was shocking. Jian Chen hurled a fist at the sky. Chaotic force condensed in his hand and collided against the blade along with the power of the laws of the sword. With a rumble, the miniature world shook gently. The blade shattered from Jian Chen's punch, reduced to a storm of energy that wreaked havoc in the surroundings. Jian Chen, on the other hand, seemed like an undefeatable god of war, bearing no resemblance to his previous injured state. His presence surged as he endured the storm of energy. Immediately, he charged into the sky and glanced towards a certain place. His pupils were astonishing as if light surged within them. Why you? The sudden change in the situation stunned the hidden primordial realm expert. The young Master Changyang, who was supposed to be at death's door, had suddenly become all energetic and displayed incredible battle prowess, which filled him with disbelief. Ignoring the shock of the hidden expert, Jian Chen hovered in the air as the power of the laws of the sword gathered, and chaotic force surged within him. A huge strand of gray sword qi immediately condensed in his hand. Suddenly, he swung it at the space before him. Jian Chen did not hold back at all this time. He completely unleashed the power of the 13th layer such that his strike truly seemed like it could split the world and make it pale in fright. It completely exceeded the level of Godking's, reaching the primordial realm. With a deafening rumble, the miniature world shook even more violently. The hidden primordial realm expert had been forced out from space by Jian Chen's strike, making him appear. He was a steadfast, middle-aged man in red robes with hair that reached his waist. Currently, he stared at the awe-inspiring young Master Changyang, who radiated with battle intent. He was completely shocked and at a loss. The middle-aged man was the ancestor of the Bloodbattle clan. Why, you're at the primordial realm? The ancestor stared at Jian Chen as his face changed rapidly. He was uneasy. My cultivation level is not important. What is important is that you probably don't have the ability to kill me, Jian Chen said coldly. He hovered in the sky as sword qi surrounded him in the form of a silver-white light. He illuminated the surroundings, making him seem like a god descending from heaven. He extended a finger gently. When the powerful sword intent that belonged to the great perfection of sword spirit appeared, a golden strand of sword qi immediately condensed up ahead. It shot through the air as a golden streak of light towards the ancestor of the Bloodbattle clan. The golden sword qi seemed to possess some black as well. It was chaotic force. The ancestor's face became extremely ugly. He also extended a finger, and strands of power of slaughter gathered around him. They formed a long beam of laws, colliding with the incoming sword qi loudly. With a deafening boom, the golden sword qi directly dispersed from the collision, reduced to countless tiny strands that scattered in the surroundings. The beam woven from laws rapidly darkened as well, but it did not disperse in the end. It shot towards Jian Chen with its remaining power. The Daoyuo sword is no longer enough. Jian Chen frowned slightly at this outcome. After reaching the 13th layer with the chaotic body and the great perfection of sword spirit with the way of the sword, he realized that the various sword techniques he grasped before have basically become useless due to their grade. This was because with his current strength, even just a casual strike would be far more powerful than the limits of the Dalo sword. The end result was that his Daoyuo sword would only possess the shape of the technique and not the essence. Jian Chen's eyes narrowed, and he gave up on using the sword techniques that he knew. With a wave of his sleeve, he sent out a streak of light that dispersed the remaining power of slaughter. Afterwards, he extended a finger on his right hand to condense a strand of sword qi into a sword-like shape, charging towards the ancestor in a threatening manner. The ancestor's face sank. He blocked Jian Chen's incoming attack and growled, "Young Master Chongyang, it's my fault this time, but fortunately, it hasn't resulted in a great mistake yet. I hope the young master can forgive me, and I will leave right away. If it were not for the fact that I had strength to spare, I would be a corpse already. Since you want to kill me, I can't let you go. Only one of us will be leaving here alive today," Jian Chen said coldly. He stopped using all his sword techniques and fought in the most basic way. He wielded the sword qi on his finger in an airtight manner, stabbing out time and time again. He was faster than lightning, only leaving afterimages behind. The afterimages stacked upon one another and became as densely packed as rain. At that moment, his attack could be described as a storm-like barrage. "Young Master Chongyang, are we really unable to let today's matter be?" the ancestor asked sternly. Although the strength of the young master had completely surprised him, he could tell that the young master was still slightly weaker than himself. If he used his full strength and paid a certain price, it was not impossible for him to kill the young master here. Moreover, this place was his miniature world. As long as the miniature world remained, he did not have to worry about the young master fleeing at all. This was because his miniature world was rather special. Many methods of escape would be useless here. "If I were really just a god king, would you let me live? It's impossible for me to just forgive and forget," Jian Chen said coldly. Killing intent radiated from him as his presence surged. He struck out with his full strength, without holding back at all. Jian Chen had gained a rough understanding of his strength now. The 13th layer of the chaotic body indeed gave him the right to challenge primordial realm experts. The only lacking aspect was his comprehension of laws. Of the laws he had comprehended, the laws of destruction still remained at late over God, while the laws of the sword were equivalent to peak Godking. In a clash of laws, he was not the opponent of the ancestors' laws of slaughter. He completely relied on the battle prowess that the chaotic force bestowed upon him to close the gap between him and primordial realm experts. "Since that's the case, don't blame me." A vicious light flashed through the ancestor's eyes. Terrifying energy erupted from him like tidal waves as the primordial realm laws rapidly descended from space. He formed seals with his hands. Every gesture and transformation seemed to abide by the truths of the world, and contain the mysteries of laws as if it could make the world move. Apocalyptic palm. Suddenly, the ancestor called out loudly, and he directly attacked Jian Chen with a palm strike that abided with countless truths. Immediately, the terrifying energy and power of laws around the ancestor rapidly condensed into a huge hand that struck towards Jian Chen with a tremendous pressure that originated from the world. The miniature world shook violently. Space distorted, making vision blurry. The entire space was like water, where it was covered with ripples. The palm strike was just too powerful. It seemed to have reached the limits of the miniature world. God-tier battle skill. Jian Chen's face changed and he became extremely stern. This was a god-tier battle skill a primordial realm expert cast, so all of its power was unleashed. It was unlike the attacks of the supreme god kings in the Neptunian Divine Palace, where both god artifacts and god-tier battle skills were weakened significantly in their hands. Even though Jian Chen had reached the 13th layer, he dared not face the ancestors' god-tier battle skill carelessly. He felt a huge pressure from the god-tier battle skill that was brimming with power. With a flip of his hand, the 9-star sword of heavenly ways appeared in Jian Chen's hand. Chaotic force rampaged within him, and all of it poured into the sword, causing the weapon to explode with dazzling light. It was like countless stars had gathered together. Huge stars were conjured from the 9-star sword of heavenly ways one after another. 126. With every star, the pressure that the sword gave off became stronger. It only stopped when 6 stars were conjured. At that moment, the pressure from the sword was extremely terrifying. no weaker than the ancestors' god-tier battle skill. God artifact. Sensing the astonishing pressure from the sword, the ancestor's face changed slightly as he felt envy from the bottom of his heart. God artifacts were so precious in the Saints' world that even many Primordial Realm experts did not possess a single one. Although the ancestor of the Bloodbattle clan had reached the Primordial Realm, and was one of the supreme figures of the Thousand-Leaf Empire, he did not possess a god artifact. Jianchen swung the sword in his hand, and terrifying energy erupted out like a tsunami. Under the radiance of countless stars, it collided with the ancestor's apocalyptic palm. Chapter 2197. Death of the Primordial Realm. 1 Boom. With that great rumble, the 9-star sword of heavenly ways clashed with the apocalyptic palm in the most intense fashion. An extremely sharp sword chi and dazzling starlight accompanied it. This was basically a clash of the Primordial Realm. The extremely powerful chaotic force collided with the god-tier battle skill forcefully, producing an extremely great explosion. The laws of the sword and the laws of slaughter intermingled as chaotic force, and origin energy rampaged. It was like resplendent fireworks, surging out magnificently. The violent energy shockwaves made even space ripple. With a destructive power, it suppressed the space of the miniature world, splaying out in all direction violently. The ripples of energy constantly forced Jianchen back. He protected himself with light from the laws of the sword, shining brightly as he pushed the defense of his chaotic body to the limit. He constantly slashed out with his sword to cut the incoming energy to pieces. Every attack possessed resplendent starlight. On the other side, the ancestor of the Bloodbattle clan was sunken. His body was unable to endure the violent energy storm, so he was forced back against his will. They had unleashed their full strength in this clash, without holding anything back. As a result, even the two of them struggled to stabilize themselves under the storm of energy created. I never thought that this young Master Chongyang would actually be so troublesome. The power he uses is so strange that I've never seen or heard of it before. Coupled with his god artifact, it's basically impossible for me to kill him. At most, it'll end up with heavy losses on both sides, thought the ancestor of the Bloodbattle clan. At this moment he felt regret. He cursed his own carelessness, taking action rashly without properly gauging his opponent's strength first. When he thought up to there, the ancestor's heart suddenly shivered. His eyes also narrowed as he stared ahead sternly. The violent storm of energy still had not dispersed. It caused space to tremble constantly, reducing the landscape before him to a blur. Even with the ancestor's eyes, he was unable to see through it. The senses of his soul was affected as well. At this moment, soaring sword chi suddenly appeared. Abruptly, a dazzling streak of light shot out from the storm of energy. The 9-star sword of heavenly ways had torn through the storm with powerful sword chi while glowing brightly, turning into a white streak of light as it stabbed towards the ancestor at a speed beyond lightning. The ancestor's eyes were frigid. His face was cold as a blood-red set of armor appeared, enveloping him completely. A sword had also appeared in his hand, shining coldly. The laws of slaughter gathered as he slashed it towards Jianchen with terrifying force. Spurt. Jianchen's 9-star sword of heavenly ways pierced through the ancestor's armor in a single stroke as it shone with dense starlight. It stabbed into the ancestor's chest with sharp sword chi and chaotic force and constantly penetrated deeper. The tip emerged from the ancestor's back as the blood of a primordial realm expert dripped from the tip. At almost the same time, the ancestor's sword stabbed into Jianchen's body. Jianchen was emotionless, and his eyes were cold. Chaotic force circulated within him wildly as strands of it surged out from his chaotic Niden. Like wild horses, it rampaged within him rapidly. Most of it gathered towards the location of the wound, fusing with the blood, flesh, and bone there. He had already pushed the defense of his 13th layer chaotic body to the limit, allowing his body to reach its toughest state. He did not fear any attacks. Coupled with the channeling of tremendous amounts of chaotic force, the location of his injury, whether it was the flesh, blood, tendon or bone, had all become extremely tough. As soon as the ancestor's sword stabbed into Jianchen's chest, He encountered a great resistance such that it became harder and harder to push his sword into Jian Chen's body. In the end, the weapon became wedged between two ribs and could no longer advance any further. The ancestor of the Bloodbattle clan could not help but gasp. His eyes widened as he stared at Jian Chen's chest in disbelief. He was shocked. Naturally, he could tell that Jian Chen did not have any protective treasure with his insight. His sword could not stab any deeper and pierce Jian Chen completely because Jian Chen's body was just too tough, so tough that it was shocking. Just the toughness of his body alone was enough to block powerful attacks from Primordial Realm experts. Unless I wield a god artifact or use a god-tier battle skill, it's very difficult for me to threaten young Master Chongyang. The ancestor became pessimistic. Jian Chen's body was so tough that it was impossible for him to kill Jian Chen with just a supreme quality saint artifact. If he could not kill his opponent, only the destruction of his Bloodbattle clan awaited him. Suddenly, the ancestor's face froze up. He stared right at Jian Chen as he could not help but become excited. He called out, "I know. You're not young Master Chongyang. Your name is fake, your identity is fake, and even your appearance is fake. You're that Jian Chen wanted by the solitary sword ancestor and the Azure Pung King. It can't be wrong. It can't be wrong. You're Jian Chen. You have a tough body and strange but violent energy. You comprehend the laws of the sword, and you wield a god artifact that shines with starlight. All of these characteristics match the description on the wanted poster." After guessing Jian Chen's identity, the ancestor's gloom completely vanished. He could not help but laugh aloud. Ha 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 ha. Jian Chen, who knows how many people are searching for you in the entire Saints world, but it was me who actually encountered you here. This is a blessing from the heavens. The ancestor of the Bloodbattle clan was overjoyed. Young Master Chongyang was actually Jian Chen. Not only was there no need to worry about revenge from the people behind young Master Chongyang, but he could even report Jian Chen's traces to the solitary sword ancestor and Azure Pung King, making the two of them owe him a favor. With the favors of the two peak experts, no one would be bold enough to provoke their Bloodbattle clan anymore on the entire planet. By then, even the Lord of Planet Tianming would have to treat their clan politely and courteously. This was because both the solitary sword ancestor and the Azure Pung King were terrifying figures who could claim to be invincible on planet Tianming. Chapter 2198. Death of the Primordial Realm. 2. The ancestor of the Bloodbattle clan was overjoyed. He believed that he was the first one to find Jian Chen. As long as he conveyed the news about Jian Chen to the solitary sword ancestor and the Azure Pung King first, destroying the Gus Clan would become a piece of cake. When Jian Chen saw how excited the ancestor had become, his killing intent rose. With an icy gaze, he said coldly, "Since I'm bold enough to fight you, that means I'm not afraid of revealing my identity, as I won't let you leave here alive." Haha. Jian Chen, you really are arrogant to look down on a Primordial Realm expert. I'd like to see how you make me stay today. The ancestor laughed aloud. After learning Jian Chen's identity, he no longer tried to fight anymore. He immediately retreated hastily in an attempt to leave here and convey the news to the solitary sword ancestor and the Azure Pung King as quickly as possible. The solitary sword ancestor and the Azure Pung King were peak experts who were renowned throughout the Saints world. Their abilities were exceptional. Every single wanted poster they had sent out detailed a simple set of hand seals to call them. As long as someone used the hand seals, they would be able to instantly alert the solitary sword ancestor and the Azure Pung King no matter how far away they were. Even though there were countless people who knew the hand seals across the Saints world, no one dared to contact the solitary sword ancestor and the Azure Pung King casually, because both of them could easily find the person who used the seals. Once they discovered someone was toying with them, the consequences would be so severe that probably no one could endure it. Clearly, the ancestor of the Bloodbattle clan knew these hand seals because they were just too simple. He basically memorized them with a glance. However, the miniature world he had cast down was indeed like what he had said, rather special. Inside, not only were all the secret techniques for escape rendered useless, but even methods of communication were rendered useless. As a result, He needed to leave this miniature world to use the hand seals to alert the two experts. You've trapped me in this miniature world, but it also restrains you. Coupled with how you're injured and how my energy is within you, your wounds will become worse and worse as time goes on. I'd like to see how you escape from my hands, Jianchen sneered. He poured chaotic force into the 9-star sword of heavenly ways, causing it to shine with the light of countless stars. It was an enchanting sight. The 6 huge stars were conjured once again. After bellowing out, he stabbed out with his full strength. This was a terrifying strike equivalent to a primordial realm expert using a god-tier battle skill. As he stabbed out, the sky roared furiously as the ground trembled. The entire space pulsed violently as sword chi radiated out, forming a tremendous pressure that fell on the ancestor's body. The expression of the ancestor of the Bloodbattle sect changed suddenly. His eyes narrowed drastically. He could feel an intense threat from the attack. It was so great that it even surpassed his arch-nemesis, the ancestor of the Gus Clan. Moreover, his presence had been locked onto. Sword intent sealed up the space around him, making it impossible for him to dodge or flee. At this moment, it was already too late for him to use his god-tier battle skill a second time. Origin energy erupted vigorously as primordial realm laws gathered on his saint artifact. He slashed out with surging energy. Crack. With an ear-splitting sound, the ancestor's supreme quality saint artifact shattered to pieces, while the 9-star sword of heavenly ways continued to shine brightly. It continued without slowing down at all, cutting off the ancestor's entire right arm. The ancestor's face twisted by an undetectable amount from the pain of losing an arm. Blood spurted out from his shoulder wildly, spraying into the sky like rain. If it were not for you, God Artifact, you would have never been my opponent, the ancestor called out viciously. He did not possess the support of a tough body like Jianchen. After being injured twice, his battle prowess had plummeted. Not to mention that he had lost his crucial right arm, so his ability to counterattack became weaker and weaker. Moreover, Jianchen had deposited a strand of pure power of the laws of the sword and chaotic force when he stabbed him, which rampaged like a wild horse right now. The ancestor of the Bloodbath clan had used his full strength to receive Jianchen's attacks, so he could spare no extra effort into suppressing the energy within him. As a result, he could only let them rampage, which worsened his wounds rapidly. The more time he wasted, the more disadvantageous it was to him. The ancestor of the Bloodbattle clan glanced at Jianchen viciously. Gritting his teeth, he retreated in a flash, traveling 100 kilometers away in an instant. Then he swung his left hand, and the space beside him immediately cracked open, creating a spatial gate that led to the outside world. Then he stepped through it without any hesitation. Oh! Just when the ancestor had made it partially out of the miniature world, a wolf's howl suddenly rang out. The terrifying sound waves formed visible ripples and emanated outwards with an ancient sense of desolation. It possessed a tremendous pressure that seemed to stand above all lives. The pressure seemed to come from the heavenly ways themselves. It was mighty and utterly shocking, enough to shake up the souls of people. At that critical moment, Jianchen had used the power of the ancient Skywolf's bloodline, unleashing an astonishing howl. The power of the bloodline had been absorbing the energy of the essence blood constantly, allowing it to rapidly strengthen. Compared to the past, the power was on a completely different level. Just when the ancestor was about to make his way out of the miniature world, he suddenly froze up. His soul suffered from a violent impact, stunning him on the spot. His gaze became lost at that moment. However, he was a primordial realm expert after all. It only took him a split second to recover. However, in battles at the primordial realm, a split second was enough to determine victory. As soon as the ancestor returned to his senses, he saw dazzling sword chi. As the endless starlight poured over, he was swallowed up by it. Spurt. Before the ancestor could react, the 9-star sword of heavenly ways had plunged into his forehead and pierced his head completely, wiping out his soul. A primordial realm expert just died like this. Just when the ancestor of the Bloodbattle clan died, the eyes of a ruddy, sage-like old man suddenly snapped open. He was in a hall fit for a king within the majestic imperial palace, several million kilometers away. His deep eyes seemed to be able to pierce through the countless obstructions and see where Jianchen and the ancestor fought. He was stern. What a terrifying wolf's howl, and there's residual power from a battle at the Primordial Realm. Has a Primordial Realm expert of the Wolf Clan come here, close to the Imperial capital? The old man was the reason why the Thousand-Leaf Empire could exist. He was the only Primordial Realm expert of the Imperial family. It was exactly because of him that the Thousand-Leaf Empire could stand among the ranks of the many ancient empires of planet Tianming at the same time. He was the person who deterred the three great organizations in the empire from acting up. As he said that, the old man stood up and was about to leave immediately. A battle between Primordial Realm experts had happened outside the Imperial City. This was an extremely significant matter to his Thousand-Leaf Empire, so he needed to investigate it completely. After all, the entire Thousand-Leaf Empire only had 4 Primordial Realm experts if he was included. Chapter 2199. Location exposed. However, just when the old man was about to leave his residence, a power that was terrifyingly shocking to him appeared. It directly seeped through the various formations outside the hall, forming a powerful barrier that encased the interior. Sensing the terrifying pulses of energy that the barrier gave off, the old man's face immediately changed drastically. He was unable to remain calm anymore. Fear filled his face. May I ask how our Thousand-Leaf Empire has offended Senior? I hope that Senior can spare us. The old man immediately clasped his hands politely as his heart was in turmoil. He thought that his empire had offended someone. What happened outside has nothing to do with you. Just stay here. An old voice boomed out of nowhere in the hall. Yes, Senior. At the same time, the 2 other Primordial Realm experts from the 3 peak clans who never paid attention to the affairs around them roused due to the shockwaves outside the city. Just when they were about to leave where they cultivated, they were also locked in by a powerful barrier that prevented them from leaving. At the location where they fought, Jianchen slowly drew his sword out from the ancestor's head. He wiped off the blood and stowed the sword away in his space ring. He looked behind him. A fist-sized silver-white orb hovered there quietly. It shone with a hazy light and was quite enchanting. Jianchen knew that this white orb was what created the miniature world. Immediately, he made his way over and grabbed it. Afterwards, he turned back and carried the ancestor's corpse, planning to leave. This was because when he killed the ancestor, the gate to the miniature world had been opened. The shockwaves from their battle would naturally pour through the gateway and into the outside world. As a matter of fact, even his wolf's howl had spread outside clearly. People would come to investigate very soon, so he could not stay here. I never thought you actually have the ability to kill a Primordial Realm expert. But just when Jianchen wanted to move, an old voice rang out behind him. Su Ran, who was dressed in simple clothes, had appeared behind him silently. She kept her presence concealed, so she was like a ghost. She moved around without creating any traces at all. So Jianchen failed to discover when she had arrived. If it were not for her speaking out, Jianchen would not have even known that she was standing behind him. Senior Su, when did you come? Jianchen clasped his hands at Su Ran. Su Ran looked at Jianchen deeply. You're someone who has shaken up the Saints' world, but I just happen to owe you a huge favor. How can I not look out for you? I know everything you did in the Thousand-Leaf Empire. Even though Su Ran's cultivation level had regressed, she was still far greater than people at the same level of cultivation. It was impossible to compare her to infinite primes with the many methods and techniques she could use. Jianchen's expression became rather unnatural. Suddenly, he discovered that he actually struggled to keep secrets from Su Ran. She was actually able to spy on him silently without alerting him. Is this how terrifying chaotic primes are? Jianchen became alarmed. Su Ran looked at the white orb in Jianchen's hand. She said, the orb in your hand is refined from a soul orb found in the heads of Old World beasts. Old World beasts are an extremely ancient and rare species in the Saints' world. In the current age in particular, Old World beasts are almost extinct. Every single Old World beast will nurture a universe within themselves that will evolve into a real world. The soul orb in your hand is the greatest treasure in an Old World beast. They're extremely valuable. That's because miniature worlds created from the soul orbs of old world beasts have some special aspects. You probably know some of them already. Jianchen could not help but properly study the orb in his hand. He had never thought that the orb would have such origins. It's just a pity that the soul orb in your hand is of a limited quality, or it would be priceless. Su Ran sighed gently and said in some pity. Then she glanced at the Bloodbattle clan ancestor's body, and she could not help but become stern. She said, "Let's go. We can't stay on planet Tianming any longer." Jianchen followed Su Ran's gaze to properly study the corpse he carried. With that, his face immediately became ugly, as the corpse's left hand formed a strange seal. Jianchen was familiar with this seal. All the wanted posters depicted them. It was the hand seals to contact the solitary sword ancestor and the Azure Pung King. Clearly, the ancestor of the Bloodbattle clan had already used the seals when he opened a gate out of the miniature world before Jianchen had managed to kill him. Although Jianchen could tell with a single glance that the ancestor had failed to complete the entire set of hand seals, the solitary sword ancestor and the Azure Pung King were both exceptional peak experts. No one knew whether the incomplete set of seals would still be able to attract their attention. "Let's go," Jianchen called out and threw the ancestor's corpse into the Anata Tower. Immediately he left with Su Ran as quickly as possible. The azure-clothed Qing Yishuan bid farewell to the scarred woman reluctantly in a rather run-down stone hut within a remote region of the imperial capital. "Sister Zi Qingcheng, you have to wait for me. Once I become powerful enough, I'll definitely come looking for you on planet Tianming." Qing Yishuan hugged the woman tightly as determination flooded her eyes. "Sister, just go. Don't worry about me. You can't forget that I'm a god. Although I'm not necessarily particularly powerful, I have just enough power to protect myself," said Zi Qingcheng. She was filled with bitterness. Naturally, she knew that Qing Yishuan would suffer a fate no different than ending up in the hands of the Gus Clan if she followed that young master Chongyang, but the young master was someone that even the Gus Clan could not afford to offend. Qing Yishuan was powerless to escape from his hands. "Enough. Master is already urging me to take you towards the teleportation formation. We need to go." At this moment, Heya said from one side. He took out some divine crystals from his space ring to give to Zi Qingcheng before leaving with Qing Yishuan. The solitary sword ancestor sat on his meteor in a region of space extremely distant from planet Tianming. He did not move at all, and was just like a statue. The Azure Pung King stood with his eyes closed beyond the meteor. He coldly stared at the sky full of stars. "My subordinates will be able to find out about Jianchen's origins very soon. As long as I find out which organization he belongs to and use that organization as a threat, I refuse to believe he won't show himself. Even if he abandons the organizations behind him, I can still find him. All I need is a droplet of blood from a relative of his, and I'll be able to find where he's hiding," the Azure Pung King said coldly. At this moment, the solitary sword ancestor suddenly opened his eyes. His old eyes shone brightly as he stared at the depths of space. He growled. "Someone has used the set of seals I left behind." The Azure Pung King's killing intent soared with that, causing space to distort violently. He said coldly, "No one is bold enough to use the method of contact we've left behind mindlessly. Since it has been used, someone must have found Jianchen's traces. Where is he?" The set of seals were not performed completely, but they're directly connected to me after all. At the moment they were used, the laws of the world will change slightly, and I'll be able to sense it with great precision. "That place should be planet Tianming," said the solitary sword ancestor before immediately standing up. "I'll be leaving first." The Azure Pung King turned into a huge Azure Pung and shot off with great speed. In a flash, he crossed an unfathomable distance, disappearing into the depths of outer space. The solitary sword ancestor, on the other hand, directly sunk into the interior of the meteor. There was a teleportation formation powerful enough to transport people across planes in there. He stood in the center of the teleportation formation and tossed out a pile of 5-colored divine crystals before vanishing. They were extremely distant from planet Tianming, so there was a lot of ground to cover. He was not as fast as the Azure Pung King, so the fastest method of travel for him was through teleportation formations. You're tuning in to the Lime's Wuxia Whispers YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.